Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the quarterfinals of Pro Tour Theros 2013. Rich Hagan sitting alongside Pro Tour historian Mr. Brian David Marshall and newly elected into the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame, Luis Scott Vargas. We have Paul Rietzel of the United States up against Makihito Mihara of Japan to kick off our quarterfinal action. And BDM, what are we going to see as the players get ready to go?
We're going to see if Paul Rietzel can overcome what his playtesting group felt was an overwhelmingly bad matchup. He's playing a white-black deck that has some mid-range elements, but starts off with like Soldier of the Pantheon and Precinct Captain, playing against a green-red combo deck, which is what Makihito Mihara called his deck, capable of just producing just tremendous amounts of mana as early as turn 3 or turn 4.
And Luis, what should we be looking out for in this matchup?
So Mihara is playing Devotion to Green deck here with Nykthos powering all sorts of absurd plays. And his two main routes to victory are, well, Nykthos letting him dump his whole hand and Garruk, Color of Beasts, refilling that hand.
Okay, and we have started off with a Temple of Abandon, a scry land from Mihara, and now here's turn 1 from Rietzel, and it's straight into action with one of the All-Stars. It's Thoughtseize. Let's take a look at that hand. We can see a Domri Raid in there, a Scavenging Ooze. Looks like we have a Nylea, God of the Hunt, Garruk, Caller of Beasts, and a Sylvan Caryatid.
And Mihara actually scryed the top card to the top. He kept it.
Okay.
So pretty quickly. So I think Paul and everyone else watching should just assume that's a land there. It's possible that it's a 2-mana, like an Alpha, another Caryatid, that sort of thing. But I would guess that a land is waiting on top, which makes taking the Sylvan Caryatid here less attractive than it would be otherwise. If you had not known Mihara had scryed on turn 1, taking the Caryatid could potentially lock Mihara out of casting Domri or Nylea. But assuming there's a land on top, it might be better to take one of the more powerful cards themselves and not try to cut off Mihara's mana.
Interesting also, Paul opened up with his hand with Temple of Silence, Plains, drew that swamp, had the Thoughtseize, but also had Precinct Captain, so had to really make a decision about whether he was going to be playing a turn 2 Precinct Captain or turn 3 Precinct Captain, or maybe play it at all. We talked about this, the Sylvan Caryatid, just nerfs all of Paul's early game.
Yeah, and Paul is going to end up taking it there, but he is running into the same thing that actually happened in my match against Paul on day 1, where if he plays a turn 1 Thoughtseize off a swamp, he can't play Precinct Captain for a few turns.
And that was a conscious decision he made here, because he did have the option to play a Precinct Captain on turn 2.
Right.
Yep. So turn 2 from Mihara is Scavenging Ooze. He's going to take 2 points of damage off that Stomping Ground to cast it, but he'll be looking to get some of that life back as creatures get out of the graveyard and into functionally +1/+1 counters on his Scavenging Ooze.
So you see a Thoughtseize, but let's take a look at what Paul has to work with here. He's got a Precinct Captain, another Precinct Captain, a Sin Collector, Desecration Demon, and a third land.
Yeah, Desecration Demon is his best card in the matchup, but Mihara did draw a Nykthos. That's the card he kept on top, and so he's going to get on board here with a Domri Raid, which does, lead to some pretty nice sequences of plays.
Yeah, so the first thing he has the chance to do is take a look at his top card of the library, potentially.
Yeah, just puts 4 loyalty on it right to start.
And just see if there's a creature there. If it is, he gets to put it into hand. The Scavenging Ooze attacks. If you're wondering what that 20 bracket means next to Mihara's name, well, he is currently our 20th ranked pro in the top 25.
With a bullet.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to change after this tournament.
Isn't it just?
Yeah. So let's take a look at Mihara's hand here. And he did not find a creature off of the activation of Domri.
No, and so it does mean that he might end up in trouble against the Desecration Demon. It's not going to be able to come out this turn, but if he keeps hitting creatures with Domri, then he gets to lock down the Demon. Otherwise, it's pretty tough. His other option is to hit 5 Devotion to Green and fight Nylea and the Desecration Demon.
Sure. Remember, he also has main deck Arbor Colossus.
Yeah, Arbor Colossus is a nice one.
And while it might seem like it would take a long time to play an Arbor Colossus and then monstrous an Arbor Colossus, it's not that hard for his deck.
Yeah, sometimes he has to wait till turn 4 before making 20 mana.
So there you see Rietzel's hand, and Sin Collector essentially pretty terrible in game 1 here.
Yeah, looking at Mihara's list, he's actually got just complete bricks, right? Like he's got no cards to hit with Sin Collector. So those are probably getting sided out.
I think we might see those gone. Yeah.
See some great synergy between Scry and Domri Raid.
Yeah, that is a pretty nice little combo. It's funny, you almost always do it in the order Mihara does. Though, if you really just need to hit a land, you actually do it the other order. You look with Domri first, and then you play the Scry land. But here, all he wants to do is hit creatures. He's looking for anything with green in its casting cost to get Nylea going. Because you can't, once he sacks creature to Desecration Demon, Nylea's not going to be able to easily kill the Desecration Demon with Domri.
So he Scryed to the bottom.
Okay. And now I'm going to have a look. Ah, ta-da.
Oh, look.
It's a creature. Well, since he's got no instants or sorceries in his deck, you'd expect plenty of creatures to come along, and there is one.
Yeah, Mihara's going to be eating worlds pretty soon here. Pelukrinos shows up for the green he was looking for.
Yeah, and there's a fantastic possibility of seeing this interact with Wasteland Viper once we get into sideboarded games sometime today, which is crazily good.
Oh yeah, the blood rush onto Pelukrinos and then eat a bunch of creatures.
Yeah, it's sort of a deck reminds me of a deck you're familiar with, Cunning Spark Mage, Basilisk Collar.
Yeah, that was one of the best sideboard plans we've ever come up with, and had played 0 games with it before the tournament. So
you play tested in your head, a time-honored tradition.
Exactly.
Certainly one Camille knows about.
Yeah.
Rietzel talked extensively this weekend about finding this mid-range deck full of choices which he isn't used to. And it's noticeable that he's definitely taking his time here early on Sunday morning, making sure that every play is spot on from his point of view.
Well, also, this is his worst game of the 5-game set, right? This is his,
this is where he has the Sin Collectors in his deck.
Yeah, the lowest percentage. So he really just wants to make sure he's eking out every possible decision.
So he brings out Desecration Demon. It's 6/6, but it won't necessarily always get to attack, and that's the downside.
Yeah, so it looks like Mihara's going to have to play Nylea. Maybe he just doesn't really have it. If he wants Domri to live, has to sack a creature to a Desecration Demon, but then he needs mana untapped to make Nylea bigger before fighting it. So he doesn't have actually too obvious of a line here. I mean, he's just got choices, and it's going to be difficult. He can also maybe play Pelukrinos, and then I guess he can make Pelukrinos a 7/7, fight Desecration Demon for 2 if it's only a 6/6, and then Domri it. But either way, that requires Domri to be alive, which is going to be tough in the face of a Desecration Demon.
So on one of the back tables, Sam Black, we talked about that idea of the first game being your worst game in the matchup. Cool. Sam Black just took game 1 against Yamamoto in what was described as, I don't know, maybe being as much as 80% in favor of the Japanese player by his playtest partners last night. So, Yamamoto this is kind of what we're seeing here, stumbled a little bit on his devotion, forgot his prayers, wasn't able to remember all the words, and came out of the gates a little slow, and Sam punished him for it.
So back here in our main action, you see Domri Raid using his middle ability. We're going to have some fight action. The Scavenging Ooze takes out the Precinct Captain, and then Pelukrinos appears for Mihara. And we're back with Rietzel, who will do a little bit of scrying of his own.
Yeah, so Rietzel's hand is not great at this point, but the Desecration Demon could just carry him to victory. There's not a whole lot Mihara can do about it without an Arbor Colossus, and Mihara's hand is kind of short on lands and relevant spells, which is a tough place to be in. On the plus side for Mihara, he can, if he just gives up Domri, just lets Desecration Demon attack, he can legitimately race with Pelukrinos and Scavenging Ooze against Desecration Demon, because Pelukrinos can just eat the Precinct Captain that Paul's probably going to play here. It's also worth noting that the Domri does take the first hit, which gives Mihara a pretty big edge up in the race. Mihara opts to feed Domri to tap the Desecration Demon instead of any of the other creatures.
Is there any line of play where he plays a Garruk next turn?
If he draws a Burning Tree Emissary, I suppose he would be able to generate enough mana off of Nykthos.
Oh, yeah, no, without the Domri, he's not going to be able to.
But he drew a Stomping Ground. So
Here we go again.
Okay.
Paul says, okay.
So he can get 4 mana out of that shrine.
yeah, now Mihara's actually in pretty good shape since he was able to just play Scavenging Ooze, play Nylea, just kind of ignore the Desecration Demon. He's actually fairly far ahead in the race. So by giving up on the Domri, this actually looks great for him.
Yeah, and we know that Rietzl doesn't have much going on, as you see on the right of your screen. Precinct Captain, Sin Collector, they kind of get outclassed when you're looking at a god on the other side of the table and heading into Devotion Land.
Well, and what kind of spot removal is there for Paul Rietzl to maybe disrupt the Devotion and turn off Nylea?
He's got 4 Heroes Downfall, 3 Doomblade in the main deck, and all he can basically do is just kill Pelucranos here and hope that Rietzl does not play a ton, or Mihara does not play a ton more creatures. But it's going to be tough since we know that Paul doesn't have any of those cards in his hand currently. Even if he draws one, Mihara's 1 land away from being able to play a Garruk and just get Nylea back active again.
Still in game 1 here, but we're heading for game 2 in Jeremy Desani of France against Camille Cornelison. Desani with his mono blue, Cornelison with mono red, and it's the blue cards that take the lead. Desani for France leads 1-0 over Camille Cornelison.
Some of those blue cards say protection from red.
Yeah, indeed they do.
Blocks are going to be tough for Paul too because Nylea conveniently gives trample. So there's not a ton you can do about that. He can throw a Precinct Captain to gain 2 life here if he wants.
No block.
No block, says Paul. And he falls to 6 life.
Paul's actually taken some pain off his own cards too. Godless Shrine and Thoughtseize add up.
Speaking of adding up, it looks like he might be able to get a Desecration Demon Air Force here.
Yeah, and it could play a little defense.
Third attack.
So Paul can play 2 things this turn, but it would just be Sin Collector and Precinct Captain, or he can just play Desecration Demon and nothing else, which probably a little more appealing, but either way is going to be, has an uphill battle to fight against an active god and a World Eater.
Yeah, you don't need to know much about Magic. You just say an active god and a World Eater. That's probably bad. What if you?
I don't know what those cards do, but they sound awesome.
I've got a Precinct Captain.
Yeah.
Kai Booty points out on Twitter that he doubts there are any 80% matchups
In Magic.
but I would like to point out that there are often 80% matchups on both sides of the matchup if you talk to Magic players.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing when I heard 80%.
Yeah.
But
You see Mihara lining up his potential attacks here.
well, the indestructible one's coming in for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's why he pushed him to the front. Or her.
Her, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Mihara can generate 8 mana, it looks like, which is enough to activate Pelucranos for 3, or he can cast a Garruk, which would draw him an average of, I mean, I don't know exactly, but it looks like a lot of cards.
Yeah.
Since
80% of his deck.
yeah.
And there's...
Yeah, we're going to get all monstrous. Away goes Precinct Captain. I'd like to attack. But I'd like to tap these down.
So he's
And
just
then I'd like to kill you.
he's just gonna go ahead and
And there you go.
throw away some creatures, tap Desecration Demon,
Yeah.
and just attack for lethal.
And
That
win.
works.
And so,
sacrificed his god there?
oh, you got to do what you got to do. And Makihito Mihara leads Paul Rietzl by 1-0. Desecration Demons, they're very big, but they do get tapped. And so where we are going to head is to Table B for the match between Jeremy Desani and Camille Cornelissen. A great matchup this. You've got Jeremy Desani of France, Camille Cornelissen of the Netherlands. But why don't we take a look at Polukranos, because that was just instrumental in taking down Game 1. But we'll have a look at that in a little while. As you see the two players there, Camille Cornelissen on your right, Jeremy Desani on the left. A gulf in terms of Pro Tour experience, in that Camille here in his 51st Pro Tour and his sixth Pro Tour top 8. Jeremy Desani on the Sunday stage for the first time.
I was very impressed with Desani when you had a chance to talk with him at the desk last night. It's the first time I've really, seen him other than like head down at the feature match table.
Get a window into him as a person.
Yeah, I was very impressed with all three of the French players.
Not least with their English skills.
Well, it was very funny. He was very much like, "Oh, great, you want me at the desk? I have the worst English out of the three of us." And it was like, you might have, the second best English out of the five of us.
Fair. You're number one, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah. So we're gearing up for game 2.
Speak some prehistoric version of the language.
Oh, hush now. So, Luis, let's concentrate on this matchup. We've got mono blue on the left of our screen, mono red on the right. What should we be looking out for in the early game here as Camille kicks us off?
So Camille's really looking for hands with Burning Tree Emissary, which is true in every matchup you play, and with the mono red deck. And it's really the best thing he has going for him in this matchup is that he can, play an Ash Zealot into a Burning Tree Emissary plus a Nykthos and get really far ahead of the mono blue deck. If the game goes long, the mono blue deck starts drawing Master of Waves and casting them, and that is really tough for the mono red deck. So,
well, here is Ash Zealot to get the ball rolling. First strike and haste, as you see there on your screen. And we are going to see a 1-3 for 2 with Scry 2 for Jeremy Desani.
Yeah, Omen Speaker kind of shutting down the Ash Zealot here.
I mean, interestingly, with the Burning Tree Emissary, you kind of want it on the third turn in this deck a lot of the time.
Yeah,
right?
you almost never cast it turn 2 because there aren't very many cards you can cast afterwards.
So you go Ash Zealot on turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary on turn 3, then with a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, you can have 4 extra mana, right?
Yeah, you get to play like Perforos or something like Hammer Perforos, all sorts of cool things. Or Ember Swallower in Camille's deck, and then follow up with Storm Breath Dragons and the like.
Stop. Hammer time. Just had to get it done early.
Yeah, David Ochoa had that song queued up on his phone every time someone played a hammer.
Good boy.
See, take a look at the hand that Camille's working with.
He's lacking a Nykthos. That's the card he wants to draw more than any other card right now.
Is that kind of the superpower moment in terms of the mono red deck? When you get the Nykthos, it's suddenly, and will explode into a different kind of game.
Yeah, he would get to play turn 4 Storm Breath Dragon here if he drew one, and then not only do you get to play like a big spell a turn early, the next turn you actually have access to just like an obscene amount of mana, and you can do all sorts of ridiculous things.
Right, if he drew, just take a look for a second though at what Desani's got to work with, and things are looking a little bit like a ticking clock for Camille.
Yeah, if Camille doesn't get on the board here pretty quickly, then Desani is going to overpower him with Thassa, Jace, Master of Waves, and then limited standout Triton Tactics.
Yeah. Was that on your list of constructed playables?
Not so much. I mean, it certainly has done some work for Desani and Pierre in this top 8. They each have one in their sideboard, but it helps play against Mizium Mortars, makes combats a little better, and it only costs 1 mana. So I figure that the utility, multiplied by the casting cost makes it worth it. Though they're not playing 4 of them. That is not the kind of card you want to draw too many of.
But we were joking a little bit about the wheel. Like if someone brought in the wheel against the Master Wave, Flamecast Wheel against Master of Waves, like Triton Tactics would even save that.
Yeah.
Wow. So much for the experts here. Sam Black is up 2-0 on Yamamoto very, very quickly. Thassa was a big deal there.
Yeah, it sounds like Thassa's just huge for black there, and 2-0, and we will get a chance to see that because we want to see the mono black devotion in action. Want to see if we get some pack rat action.
I mean, Luis is team pack rat.
Yeah, I mean, most of my experience with pack rat has come in the sealed rounds of tournaments, where it's a little more effective, I think. But it looks like it's been good here in the standard Pro Tour as well.
So there you get a look at Camille Corneliussen's hand on the left of your screen, Dzani's hand in text form on the right of your screen. All the information here on Pro Tour Sunday, as Omen Speaker is looking to get in the way.
Dzani could be considering the Triton Tactics here, since now he can get to, yep, looks like he's going to trade a Triton Tactics for an Ash Zealot, which is a pretty respectable trade.
Camille's like, sure.
Yeah.
No.
So block, Mutavault duly activated, and now for 1 blue mana.
Camille's like, what pick did you get that?
There you see the Triton Tactics that Jeremy Dzani is about to pull the trigger on. He chooses his 2 creatures. It's up to 2 creatures, +0/+3. And anything they block won't be untapping next time.
Yeah, he's going to be locking down the other Ash Zealot.
Yeah.
I mean, as an anti-Mizzy Mortars card, that's really exciting, actually.
Yeah, you have to have 2 toughness to start with, but I imagine a lot of the 1 toughness creatures, aren't necessarily in after board, like Judge's Familiar. I don't know how much, you're going to want that against the mono red deck without any sorceries that, besides Mortars, which, yeah, is a little easier for the red deck to pay for.
All right, and then we take a look at, speaking of Mizzy Mortars, we got one in Camille Cornelissen's hand. He's a little locked down by his mana.
Now, I know that life totals don't tell the full story, but should we be thinking with Dzani at 18 still against a mono red deck that's meant to be quick? That's an exceptionally strong life total for Dzani.
Yeah, I'm a little curious why the Ash Zealot is in play still here. But other than that...
Oh, yeah. That's right. That Mutavault was...
Yeah.
It's about not to be.
Okay.
Yeah, which is... I mean, aside from the impact on the red zone, I mean, it's also, that represents a lot of mana.
Yeah, so life totals aren't as important here as you might think. I mean, despite this being like a mono red deck and a mono blue deck, it's actually more about who can get their game plan going, because once either deck starts rolling,
right,
they can win in like 1 or 2 turns off just like a giant Master of Waves followed by another one, or, a Thassa followed by, another one, or like a Storm Breath Dragon plus a Perforos, all these like just insane like large plays. They're not really looking to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop and curve out quite as much. It's actually more the blue deck than the red deck.
So there we see Jace, Architect of Thought, come down. And Dzani's got all the tools in hand to win this game. He's got a Thassa, he's got a Master of Waves.
Right, so he's going to send Jace upwards and blunt more attacks. That Ash Zealot, of course, does not untap. So now we get a look at Camille's hand. Burning Tree Emissary there, Mizzium Mortars, Perforos, another Ash Zealot, which haven't done a lot so far this game.
It's all the cards he needs except the Nykthos.
Yeah. And do you sit back and hold the Burning Tree Emissary at all, or
against removal heavy decks? Yeah, that's often a play you'll make. But the mono blue deck has like Tidebinder Mage at best, so for the most part, you're not too worried about the Burning Tree Emissary getting destroyed.
So Burning Tree into Ash Zealot. Let's aim at Jace.
And thanks to the hammer here, the Burning Tree gets to get in immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So if Camille drew a Nykthos, he'd be able to make...
Yeah, he'd go up to 9 mana immediately, gets to play Perforos and Storm Breath. So even though he's fairly behind right now, the game is definitely not over. He's a Nykthos away from, kind of exploding out the gates. Pretty tough to split this anyway, but Tidebinder Mage versus the lands. I mean, Dzani hasn't missed a land drop yet, so you can't really put him on needing the land that badly.
Right.
So around the tables, it's 1-0 here, Desani over Cornelsen. 1-0, Dajon leads Guillaume Wafatapa. 1-0, Mahara over Rietzel. And 2-0, Sam Black over Kentaro Yamamoto.
He does take the 2 lands, and that's how it got split.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that makes sense given Desani's hand. But again, it's Tidebinder Mage is one of the more dangerous cards in the matchup, and I don't think you can split land Tidebinder versus land. I think even though Desani wants lands, he'd rather have a Tidebinder and a land than 2 lands.
Well, I don't know that he necessarily. I mean, would obviously like 2 lands, but what 1 land is more than enough for him to do a couple of different things this turn.
Yeah. And with a Jace that's not necessarily going to die, he might get to, -2 at next turn as well, which means if he hits his land drop this turn, he's probably going to hit it next turn also.
Anecdotally, you guys have watched a lot more Magic this weekend than I have so far, but anecdotally, the blue decks seem to always have so many cards in hand. That's before they get to do their crazy card draw bit at the end of the game. They always seem to have so many options available.
Yeah, I mean, they have Thassa's Bident and Jace, which really set that up pretty well. And
where do you fall on the Jace versus Thassa's Bident decision tree? Like, it seems like that was the direction, the 2 different directions people took popular versions of this deck.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to play cards like Cloudfin Raptor and Judge's Familiar, then and Master of Waves and all that, you're better off playing. I mean, Thassa's Bident does lead you to more explosive power. I think that's what you're going for. Like, it helps justify the inclusion of all the small creatures that really power the rest of your cards. I mean, it's a synergy deck, which is one of the reasons I really like Theros, is that the powerful cards are almost all synergy cards. You've got, decks like Mahara's, Camille's, Desani's, like all these decks are based on just all sorts of synergy, and the cards aren't just raw power.
So Desani now, on that turn, it was a very good turn because he had Omen Speaker, he scryed 2, he didn't like the land and Frostburn Wid that he saw there, and then he gets to play a Nightveil Spectre, which has hybrid mana, but the blue half of that is blue, and so that's 3 blue on the table just from 1 card, quite apart from being a very respectable beater through the air towards Blue Devotion.
Do you preemptively just mortars the Nightveil Spectre here?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that Camille can do here because he can put Jace to 1 here if he mortars the Nightveil Spectre and attacks, but that's not terrible. He's just getting too far behind here, and even though Nightveil Spectre is not actually a huge threat when it hits, just because Desani can't cast any of Camille's spells right now, you don't want it to start hitting too often, and looks like because Perforos can attack, just slamming a Perforos is pretty nice.
Yep, so Perforos is indeed what comes down. Can I have a read, says Desani.
The only disadvantage here is that now if you attack with all your 2/2s, Nightveil Spectre just gets to pick 1 off. But if you attack with just Perforos, then it's pretty easy just to chump with the Omen Speaker.
Yeah, it's 6/5 and it's indestructible, but it can indeed be blocked. There's no trample going on here.
Desani verifies that.
Well, you want to be sure, don't you? You don't want to just randomly put something in the way and they go, what? And I took damage as well? No, not how that works. So Desani draws. Looks like a Frostburn Weird going into hand there.
Yeah, I think he scryed that Frostborn Weird and pushed a land and left the Weird on top with his Omen Speaker, knowing he was going to be mastering some waves this turn.
Yeah, he's looking for a blue-blue 2-drop. That's the perfect card.
Oh, let me see if I can get your Nykthos here.
Yeah, he actually didn't want to play that island before attacking. For that reason exactly, but I don't know how much it matters here. It looks like he probably hit a red card.
Good news for United States fans. Paul Rietzel has equalized against Makihito Mahara on the match we began with. Paul Rietzel with his Orzhov mid-range deck, black-white, brings it to 1-1 against the 2006 world champion.
We're about to see 9 elemental tokens here.
Here we go. Master of Waves. Let's have a bunch of tokens.
5, 6, 9.
Yep. Okay.
Sure, the tokens will be incoming shortly. Nope, there they are.
9. I mean, you usually carry around 3 or 4 soldier tokens in your kit bag, but you're going to have to start having deck boxes for the tokens in this deck.
The rare 1/0 token.
Yeah, I have not heard of that one before.
It's a beautiful thing, that, in design. You've got to love a 1/0 token. I think that's great.
That's not an Ichthos.
No. So, Boros Reckoner.
Yeah, with a Nixthos, then Camille might have been able to play enough stuff, including an overloaded Mizium Mortars, to clear out all the tokens. But without it, it's going to be pretty tough for him to come back here.
And again, this is a game, we talked about the life totals. They've basically done nothing for a very long time as the game has developed.
Yeah, I expect the life total swings in this match to be fairly large and sudden.
Are you alive? Now you are not.
I really like the one Nixthos that Sam Black and the rest of the guys from Star City had in their deck. I think playing the one Nixthos is definitely worth the cost of having another colorless land. Imagine what Dizani could do with a Nixthos, this turn.
Yeah, Camille doesn't need to imagine that. He's got enough problems on board as it is.
I'm sure he can imagine drawing his own Nixthos, though.
Yeah, that's what he's looking for every turn here.
Is he just, he's not 3.
I don't think he's dead.
Not quite dead.
This turn, but
It's close. He's nearly dead.
he's getting to the point where without a mortars or anything else, he's not going to be able to come back here.
So Camille passes the turn. We go back to Jeremy Dizani, who's an incredibly patient player. That's something we've seen on the European Grand Prix circuit. He is super, super patient. Is there a danger that he can wait too long and just let Camille get to that Nixos and suddenly the game changes completely?
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be aware that Camille's a Nixthos away from casting a Mortars or a giant spell like that, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's also kind of unfortunate that Master of Waves does get held back by Hammer of Perforos, since it makes colorless golems. But, well, this is going to be a fairly easy split here, since there's another Master of Waves in this pile. Which could come close to making things lethal. They stack in a very, very nice manner.
Right, suddenly those are 3 power tokens.
Yep. And Master of Waves is exactly, of course, what Dizani takes into his hand.
Mutavault
And,
also
and the
getting
Mutavault
bonus.
also an elemental.
Yeah. So it looks like 10 tokens here.
Yeah, another 10. Have you got another 10 tokens there, or are we into Dice Land? I want to see the tokens.
So I
Boo.
think the Dizani can actually just attack with everything here, and actually it will be lethal.
Including the Mutavault.
Including the Mutavault, yeah. Since Camille can block 5 creatures once he makes a hammer token, and that the Mutavault being the 5th there, since those are all the highest power creatures, and then
Doesn't look like he's activating the Mutavault.
it might be lethal without the Mutavault. Let me just take a look here. He might not be counting the hammer. Okay, he's counting the hammer here.
He's letting the hammer block his Master of Waves.
It's possible, of course, that he's mapping out attacks. He's saying, look, I'm not attacking yet. And
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
he,
This
and maybe
doesn't
he
look
still
like
has
a
the
final declaration, but it does
But
look
he-
lethal anyway.
But it looks like he's past the point of,
Okay.
being able to animate a Mutavault.
But I mean, sometimes if you're playing with people, you can say, hey, listen, I'm just going to map out some attacks here. Maybe I'm going to activate my Mutavault. I'm not sure
Yeah.
yet. But
And he's even got the disperse for the purpose. So
okay.
yeah, this is more than enough.
Yeah, that's...
And that is it. And Jeremy Dizani of France, in his first Pro Tour Top 8, leads 6-time Pro Tour Top 8 Hall of Famer Camille Cornelissen by 2-0. And Dizani in great shape.
So I think we're going to check in on Kentaro Yamamoto and Sam Black's Game 3. We're watching them on another monitor that we have that lets us look at some of the other tables. Luis, Yamamoto looked like, great, you guys are making me wait for this. The look you're kind of familiar with from your San Diego match.
That is not the most fun part of the top 8, but he's still not out of it yet. He's still got a chance to win the Pro Tour. So at this point, he's got to just play like it doesn't matter.
Also something you know about. We talked about that in your Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Being down 0-2 in your first quarterfinals on the Pro Tour.
No, not the position I certainly wanted to be in, but ooh, and Yamamoto's got a pack rat in his opening hand. I like where this is going.
A position you do want to be in.
So there you see the two players, Kentaro Yamamoto on the left of your screen, Sam Black from Team Star City Games on the right, and they are ready to rock and roll with their Game 3. Yamamoto playing Mono Black Devotion with the likes of Desecration Demon, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Lifebane Zombies, 2 Pack Rats. That's the really fun one. There, a couple of Whips of Erebos, and we have another god. It's Erebos, God of the Dead. So we are away, and Yamamoto begins with an old-school Thoughtseize.
And he's going to look at a hand of Island, 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 Cloudfin Raptor, Tidebinder Mage, Master of Waves, Rapid Hybridization.
Which is a decent hand. Yamamoto's got a good hand against it with Thoughtseize and Doomblade plus a pack rat. So it'd be interesting to see what he takes here, since Rapid Hybridization does stop the pack rat plan, but at a pretty big cost. He could just take the Cloudfin Raptor and kind of make Tidebinder Mage not as useful, just because Tidebinder here is just a devotion enabler. It looks like he's going in on the pack rat plan, though, just taking the hybridization.
So there is a Cloudfin Raptor. Yeah, sorry, pardon?
It's the limited superstar. Yeah, take a look at the hand of Yamamoto. Talking about limited all-stars.
Yeah, Grey Merchant.
I've drafted this deck in some sort of let's scrape together packs from multiple sets.
Yeah.
And then the hand Sam's been working with. Take a look.
And Yamamoto here, not really looking to trade a pack rat for a Tidebinder Mage, I don't think. I guess a second pack rat in hand does make that a little more attractive, but it still takes his whole turn because he's going to have to discard to make his guy into a 2/2. And the Tidebinder Mage will be not too relevant soon. Ooh, that was a good draw.
So, yeah, Night Veil Spectre from Sam. Cloudfin Raptor evolves its way upwards.
This could be a quick game. I mean, Sam hitting 1, 2, and 3 with Master on 4 is pretty good, though. Yamamoto does get to, looks like he's going to Hero's Downfall the Night Veil Spectre at some point here. He's going to just make a second pack rat just to make it a little harder for Sam to attack and possibly even try to race him. And Grey Merchant of Asphodel actually does count the pack rat tokens.
Yeah,
I think it makes copies of it.
They
so
are
there's
exact copies of pack rat. So each of those tokens has a black pip.
A 4th land for Yamamoto means that he can actually play Doomblade and Devour Flesh in the same turn here, which is not a bad way to start.
So you see.
Doesn't look like he necessarily has a 4th land, though.
Yeah, so Hero's Downfall is available.
Yeah, that can kill the Night Veil Spectre. That reduces, the chances that Sam gets to just slam something off Yamamoto's library, but it does still leave Yamamoto behind to Tidebinder plus Cloudfin Raptor. He does have to save a kill spell for Master of Waves, though. He knows that one is coming.
Right. Yep. The old 10 for 1.
Yeah.
How much of a card do you count a token as when you're calculating card advantage?
No blocks, and we're going to see a discard.
Looks like we're just racing here.
Yeah, because another token is going to appear, so.
I wonder if Sam Black drafted a Swift Justice.
Yeah. So first, take a bite out of the apple here with a Night Veil Spectre.
So to the air. Trigger. That's a Grey Merchant.
Oh, Gary.
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 tokens will appear briefly.
Yeah, not for too long.
Yamamoto at 9. Yep, away we go. Go away, Master. Go away, tokens.
And then he gets to hard cast.
Oh, wow!
And in.
Drew the second pack rat.
And in for 12.
So this pack rat, I mean, it's not a bad card.
Who needs Assemble the Legion when you can have Pack Rat?
What Sam needs to do is draw a Nykthos so he can Devotion Black off Night Veil Spectre to cast the Grey Merchant. That would be a pretty nice swing.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, Sam's actually losing this race by a lot now. If he doesn't chump here, then he's got to chump 4 things next turn. Yamamoto still has Hero's Downfall of his last card, cutting off Master of Waves as a potential draw. So, Pack Rat might be Yamamoto, one of Yamamoto's more effective plans in this matchup.
Certainly looking that way here in Game 3 as Sam untaps and draws. He's drawn a Frostburn Weird.
To go with Island that he was holding. We know that Yamamoto's still holding a Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, so Sam is going to need 4 chump blockers. He has 4 creatures, but Hero's Downfall makes that difficult. And even if Yamamoto didn't have it, Sam would just get his board, completely wiped.
Yeah, Sam had a little raised eyebrow once he drew that Frostburn Weird, and he knows he's in a very rough spot here in Game 3.
He could try to smack with Night Veil Spectre and draw something relevant, but
like you said, hit the Nykthos. Maybe this.
Yeah, he could hit the. He could try and hit the Nykthos here. Trying to think what other castable. Looking at Kentaro's list, there are no other castable spells. He could hit a Mutavault as another blocker. He could hit the Nykthos. That would be good. But because Sam doesn't have any black mana yet, he's not going to be able to cast anything else.
Sam's is just not worth it.
Yeah.
And so that means Sam Black leads by 2-1 over Kentaro Yamamoto. So a reminder of where we are. Desani 2-0 over Cornelsen at the moment. It's best 3 out of 5 though. Dajon of France 1-0 over Guillaume Wafatapa's Esper control deck. 2-1 now to Sam Black over Kentaro Yamamoto. And the match that we will be going to next is where we began, and that's Paul Rietzel of the United States against Makihita Mahara of Japan, the 2006 world champion, up against the 2010 Pro Tour Amsterdam winner Paul Rietzel. They are tied at 1-1 right now. So Colossal Gruul, essentially Devotion to Green, if you like, up against Orzhov mid-range for Rietzel. The players are in action in their Game 3. And there they are.
It's going to be 9 in a second, yeah.
And there you see the board state, and there's a lot going on. We've got a Garrett Caller of Beasts on the right of your screen with 5 counters on. You've got Voyaging Satyrs. You've got a couple of Burning Tree Emissaries. There are Elvish Mystics on the right-hand side. On the left, you've got Elspeth, Sun's Champion, with some tokens that Rietzel's been making. Elspeth's at 5 counters, and he has a Desecration Demon. Right now, it looks like he is resolving a Read the Bones. So the chance to draw 2, scry 2, lose 2, it's all very too symmetrical on Read the Bones. And that's what Rietzel's doing at the moment. He will, when that finishes resolving, go from 11 down to 9. Mahara, as you can see, is at 10.
And we've got a pretty classic battle of Garruk versus Desecration Demon here. One that Desecration Demon is not incredibly well equipped for. It ends up, becoming gigantic. But Garruk is pretty good at finding fodder to feed to it every single turn.
Because Garruk says you get to look at the top 5 and find all creature cards. So it's pretty hard to miss. I mean, it happens, but...
How many creatures are in Mahara's deck?
4, 8, 11, 15, 19, 21, 25, 28. Yeah, 28.
28, and he could have sided in more, though. It doesn't look like he's going to want Mistcutter Hydras or Nylea's Disciples quite as much in this matchup.
He said he was bringing in Nylea's Disciples in against almost everything, but he was taking out different things for it, depending on the matchup.
That makes sense.
He thought it was one of his most valuable sideboard cards.
Yeah, I mean,
Silver
4 mana, 3/3, gain 10 is a pretty strong card. Yeah. So let's see if Elspeth can produce more creatures than Garruk. On the plus side, Mahara does not look like he has a Nykthos right now. So without one of those, he can't just explode the way he could if he had one.
Yep, so Elspeth's up to 6.
Yep.
Ultimately, Emblem Land is +2/+2 and flying, should we get there.
Mahara also could just use Garruk to drop Arbor Colossus directly into play, and then monsters it. But he's just gonna grab some new cards instead.
Well, that was less than exciting, to
or
be
new
fair.
card, yeah. And Arbor Colossus actually doesn't fight that well right now because with an Elspeth in play, Paul could minus it. That does kill the Desecration Demon, but Desecration Demon is not making a lot of headway against this board of elves and caryatids and burning tree emissaries.
Sure.
Okay.
So the Arbor Colossus 6/6 and reach. Monstrous is 3 and then gets to destroy a flyer when it becomes monstrous.
When you did your constructed set review, Arbor Colossus go in the playables?
Oh yeah, Arbor Colossus is a good one. It's actually ended up being better even than I thought it was, but that's because I hadn't fully taken into account how good Nykthos one was when looking at all the cards. But given that you're generating sometimes like 8 mana on turn 4, Arbor Colossus becomes a lot stronger.
Plus the fact that Arbor Colossus has 3 green pips, which allows you to just continue to sort of keep your decks fueled in the mid game.
Yeah, it's the card that like you accelerate out like maybe just 1 turn earlier with Nykthos, but then the turn after that again you're at like +6 mana or whatever the number ends up being. Paul currently looks like reading an Arbor Colossus here.
Curious where you had Voyaging Satyr on your constructed
I did not
playables.
see this one. Again, Nykthos being great did lead me to evaluate Voyaging Satyr
I
differently.
would like to attack.
I would like to attack, says Paul Rietzel.
I find that unlikely to believe that that's going to happen.
Certainly not with the Desecration Demon. Second counter now on there, so that's an 8/8 if it ever gets to attack.
No, throwing some Elspeth tokens at the Garruk doesn't seem like a bad idea though. I mean, you only actually lose 1 to the Colossus, 2 get blocked by Caryatids, and then you hit Garruk for 3 there.
So I have priority again before I declare attackers.
Ah.
Paul going to cast a Devour Flesh in his beginning of combat step still.
And eat an Elvish Mystic is my guess.
Yeah, but nothing better to do with it at this point.
Yeah.
It's looking unlikely that Arbor Colossus is going to get got.
He's hoping to trick Mahar into
Yeah.
sacking the Arbor Colossus.
Oh, what if Mahar really wants to gain 6 life? Yeah, Garruk, in the Garruk versus Elspeth head-to-head, it looks like Garruk's also a little ahead here.
Rietzel looks away from the board for a moment just to do some math.
The funny thing is, Paul's not actually playing that much more deliberately than he normally does. He just normally plays aggro decks, so you don't notice quite as much.
I'll Devour Flesh you.
He does cast the Devour Flesh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So away goes. And Mahara's actually thinking
Mahar's
about
trying
the
to
choice
decide.
here.
Yeah.
11 to 11.
I think the Caryatids being untapped and able to block tokens actually it might be the tiebreaker here.
Yeah. Deciding between a little extra life and some extra counters on Garruk there.
Yeah, it seems I don't see how you can not make this attack just because you're going to use Elspeth post-combat. You're either going to blow up the 2 big creatures or make more
No,
tokens.
it sounds like he just passed the turn.
Yeah, I guess if he really wants
Or
to blow.
passed. Oh. Did not see the the ups of that.
And slamming a Ghost Council.
Yep.
Colossus doesn't trample though, so you can just chump it with 1 token if you really need to. Of course, Elspeth is going to go ultimate next turn.
Yes.
Here, so Mahara does have to worry about that, and then now Paul has a ton of damage on the board.
That is a big, big board on the left there.
Those are 3/3 flyers next turn.
Yeah, we're going to see Paul get all emblematic with Elspeth Sun's Champion. +2/+2 and flying.
So Paul leaving the Ghost Council in play just in case, since if Elspeth survives, the extra 2 damage doesn't matter at all.
Okay.
Garruk
Getting ready
up to
here.
7, so
Ooh. All right, Pelucranos. Not necessarily a miss there, but
Except
Elspeth's going to be tough.
look at what's in Mahara's hand.
He drew the Nykthos this turn.
He did draw the Nykthos this turn.
Okay.
Sorry to slow roll you there, Luis.
Yeah, I'm just playing the board here, and
Right, you were approaching that from Paul's seat.
yeah. So the Nykthos means that Mahara might have a shot at just nuking enough creatures here to make an attack here reasonable.
I mean, there are 11 creatures on Rietzel's side of the board right now.
which is not a small amount.
It is not. Barely fitting on our screen.
So Mahara can make 11 mana, which is not actually enough to kill Elspeth here, since he can shoot down a bunch of the tokens, but Paul does have a Ghost Council as well.
I can tell you that Pierre Dajon of France is en route for an upset. Certainly in terms of experience, he's in his first Pro Tour top 8 against Guillaume Wafatapa in his 5th, but Wafatapa is 2-0 down. You will see game 3 next.
So Mahara can eat a ton of tokens and attack with Colossus. So Mahara can maybe make things not lethal here if Elspeth ultimates, but even that might be difficult because a 7/7 flying Ghost Council means that Arbor Colossus looks like it's coming in.
And aiming at Elspeth.
The Mahara can also just leave all his mana up. If Paul ultimates, he can respond by floating a ton, shooting some tokens, and then ultimating Arbor Colossus, or monstersing Arbor Colossus. Ultimate does sound right for these cards, by the way.
Ultimonstering.
Yeah.
Oh, Paul says, "What did you write about me?"
Yeah. What do you think I should do next?
So if he pays 9 for Pelicano's green and 8, then he gets the Pyrokinesis me for 4. Is that the way it works, basically? Okay.
He gets to Pyrokinesis me 4, has been called.
Yeah, Paul busy just trying to work out how this all works.
You can make 9 mana, so you can kill 4 guys. So if I block, and then do that, and then I've got...
By the way, I like that Mahara's playing, after hours draft style. He's just leaving his Voyaging Satyr up. Oh, I have this card.
Yeah. I mean, I like doing that. When I play against people I know, I don't mind doing that as well.
So 1 token.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And an Obsidat somewhere in the middle there. It's
Yeah.
almost like camouflaged in Heroic Soldiers. Oh, look, it's a Ghost Council. Paul takes a look at that hidden card you can see on your screen.
There may be responses here.
Yeah.
So Mahara can make...
And look at that, Riesel's just like edging the emblem in from the top of the screen. It's like, here it comes, it's coming. Here comes the
Mahara
emblem.
can make 11 mana total, but he needs to...
I think he's just...
He needs to be able to monstrous Arbor Colossus to kill the Ghost Council once it gains flying.
But then he has to deal with all the other 3/3 flyers.
Yeah, which leaves him
Think
not
he's
enough
just
mana
dead.
to...
Yep.
We have our first semi-finalist here at Pro Tour Theros. It is Sam Black. He has defeated Kentaro Yamamoto of Japan by 3 games to 1. The mono blue devotion turned out to also be devotion to black. Sam Black. And so we are going to head back to game 3 of Guillaume Wafatapa now against Pierre Dajon. And there, well, the Frenchman, that doesn't tell you much because they're both French, but the Frenchman Pierre Dajon leads 2-0 in that match. Rietzel, meanwhile, 2-1 up. Dazani, 2-0 up. Sam Black in. And now here we go with Guillaume Wafatapa and Pierre Dajon. You're looking at the hand of Guillaume Wafatapa. You see a Sphinx's Revelation. It's all the greatest hits from the last year, essentially. Aetherling there, Jace Architect of Thought. You see in his opening hand, and Dajon there on the right in his first Pro Tour Top 8. And we're getting ready for the players to go. And we're away. Wafatapa, who begins with a tapped land.
I can imagine that Wafatapa playing a Scryland on like turn 1 or 2 is just like the thing he wants to do the most anyway.
Yes.
He likes tap lands more than anyone else I know. I think he played more Vivids in all his like 5-color decks than anyone else did, just because he's like, lands coming to play tapped is fine.
It is also noticeable that in all his deck lists, he lists the lands first, because they're the most important things.
Yeah.
It is a hallowed fountain that has led off for Wafatapa. Dajon, meanwhile, he has a much simpler mana base of 3 Mutavault and 21 islands.
And Wafatapa actually doing something most players don't, because he doesn't anticipate needing the land to come to play untapped. He's waiting on his Temple of Deceit, his scry land, until turn 3. So he has slightly more information about what he might need.
So Dajon is going to make his first opening play. It's a Tidebinder Mage, which doesn't do an awful lot right now.
Doesn't get sided out in many matchups for the blue deck just because of the body and the double blue mana cost.
Yeah, well, it's like Ash Zealot and Frostburn Weird in the mono red deck. Is you never side out your 2-drops because you actually need all of them. They all essentially tap for mana in the red deck, and in the blue deck they enable Master of Waves and Thassa too well.
So Waffatappa there.
Temple of Deceit, Scries.
And just past the turn. Historically, Waffatappa is never in a rush within a game.
I did see him play a mono red deck once, but it was just once.
In testing?
He didn't like it?
No, that was in Worlds 2007. Though. In the Legacy deck they played was Dragon Stomping mono red.
Oh, wow, okay. Here's Nightveil Spectre from Pierre Dajon. Again, triple blue in its casting cost, but with 21 islands, he does not care.
So let's take a look at what these players have to work with. A full hand for Guillaume Waffatappa. He's going to play a Jace, Architect of Thought.
And +1 it is my guess there. Yeah, since he doesn't want it to die immediately to Spectre, hitting Waffo for 1 here and getting a grab at a free card seems like a pretty nice way to start things off.
And we take a look at Dajon's hand. More Nightveil Specters. He's got his own Jace, Architect of Thought. He's got a Bident of Thassa.
And here
which
that
is
comes.
a pretty big card in this matchup.
Yeah, Bident means that he's definitely attacking Waffo directly, since he gets a free card for later off the Spectre and a free card for
one from you, one for me.
Oh.
Did he hit a gainsay?
Yes, he did. Counter target blue spell.
Things are looking tough for Waffo here. Nightveil Spectre is pretty aggressive against mono blue, or rather Esper.
Jace, Architect of Thought, will go down to 3, and so we will see what we call the mini factual fiction. Reveal 3, there's a Supreme Verdict, and 2 planes there. So that's the choices. So
Supreme Verdict or 2 lands.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's the split, which is actually kind of tough for Waffo since he doesn't have the second white here.
Ew.
And then Gainsay means that if he tries to Azorius Charm the Spectre, it does just get Gainsayed. He can fight over it with Dissolve, but that's still not super profitable.
He takes the lands.
And he can't cast the Verdict otherwise, so I think that taking the lands makes a lot of sense.
The winner of this will advance to play Sam Black in the semifinals of Pro Tour Theros, and there you see Dajon's hand. He's got so much going on.
Yeah, drawing multiple cards to turn off the Spectre plus the Bident means that he's actually keeping up with that Jace without even trying.
And then the hand for Waffatappa.
It's not like any of those are bad cards, but here comes Mutavault. Waffatappa sitting with 6 cards in hand. And that was at you, à toi, and à toi aussi, also at you.
Looks like Waffle's going to fight over this Gainsay here.
So I will gainsay that, and I will dissolve that. And that actually will go on top. Then I get to scry off my dissolve. And cautiously, I will send it to the bottom.
All the cards go to Waffle's bin. That was actually, even though Waffle had to trade multiple cards for 1, and Pierre got to draw a card, Waffle does have a Jason play, and he can just like play an Aetherling. There's not much of a disadvantage in this match to just slamming Aetherling. It doesn't get killed by much. There's not a whole lot Pierre can do about it with only 1 blue up.
Waffatappa presumably about to lay land number 6. But first, a little bit of card draw via Jace. And it'll be either 2 lands, Jace, in some combination of Dajon's choice. It is indeed 2 land and Jace. That's the choice.
And at this point, I think Waffle just grabs the Jace here. I mean, he's got a couple lands in his hand, so seems like even for someone who likes his real estate as much as Waffle Top,
Sure.
I don't think he needs lands 8 and 9. Well, not yet, at least.
And is the Sphinx's Revelation not a consideration particularly?
No, Aetherling just gets him on the board. It stops the Mutavaults from effectively attacking, and it puts Pierre on a clock. Like, Waffle's actually getting to the point where even though he's drawing extra cards, if he doesn't do anything, Pierre draws too many extra cards that a Revelation actually doesn't really even put him that far ahead.
Sure.
Plus, if he plays Aetherling now, he can play a Revelation in a couple turns for 4 or 5, and that's much, much better.
I don't know about you, but the angle of Guillaume's deck in Graveyard is actually tilting me.
Oh.
Literally.
Well, they are tilted.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
So, mini factor fiction from Dan.
And what we see is a Frostburn Weird, an island, and a fantastically entertaining card, Cyclonic Rift.
Which I find it really funny that there's a split between Cyclonic Rift and Disperse in these decks, where Cyclonic Rift is the obviously much more powerful spell, but Disperse being able to bounce your own like Master of Waves is just quite enough to push it over the top.
Yeah, Cyclonic Rift cannot target your own permanents.
Right. So Cyclonic Rift's like the bigger threat here. It's not, I think, at its best against control by any stretch, but it can fog Aetherling for a turn. It can, mess with detention spheres. So it looks like putting it by itself was a good idea.
Yeah, because that's what Dajon has decided to have.
And he could just bounce the Aetherling, but that might be his best play because it wastes 6 of Waffle's mana. But it's still not incredibly bad for Waffle since he does get to just untap and play it again.
Just a reminder for those of you at home who haven't been paying a ton of attention to the rules of Magic lately, the fact that we have Jace on both sides of the board, that's fine. It's not a mistake. It's only if you put a second one of your own into play.
And even that rule has changed as well.
Yes, that's right. But the deal is right now, there's no problem with you both having that Jace. As someone said, that made the green-white mirrors kind of interesting with Trostani's on both sides.
Yeah, I think that without that rules change, then this set wouldn't really work all that well because both sides would have Nykthos. They're both trying to cast gods.
Sure.
It would make things, fairly difficult to play. But with the new Legend rule, the set plays great.
So Jace goes to the yard and 3 more cards.
Pretty familiar split here.
Yeah.
I'm going to fall out with you if you keep doing things like that. Just saying.
Ultimately, it's too much for you.
And you can pack it in as well. You should know better. You do know better.
So at this point, even though Waffle is down 2 games, I like the way his board looks. He's got an Aetherling and a Jace going, so that is not a bad place to be in.
And this has kind of swung around because the early game definitely belonged to Dajon here. We felt he was in pretty good shape. The Night Veil Spectre was down. It was taking cards away from Guillaume. He was drawing cards off his Bident. So we see a Doomblade come into hand for Guillaume.
Which is a nice draw, too.
Still with that opening hand Sphinx's Revelation.
And Guillaume is kind of flush with Jace's here, so wouldn't be surprised if he just cashed in the one on board for, a look at a couple cards and then played another one, maybe did the same.
Right, get to look 6 cards deep into his deck.
Yeah, he can keep it in play because it saves him a ton of mana, and then that lets him play Revelations and Doomblades and all that, but it looks like the free value is too much for him to pass up.
Yeah, there's a, wow.
Hero's Downfall, Doomblade, land.
So it's Doomblade, land, and Heroes. I thought he was doing the shuffle
Just the
split.
shuffle?
No, I think he's being a little bit more deliberate than that, but
Yeah, Doomblade, land versus Heroes Downfall.
the funny thing is, in general, the Doomblade's actually a little better for Waffle just because it's cheaper, but because of Night Veil Spectre actually secretly being a black card as well, Doomblade does not quite do as much.
What's the craziest Night Veil Spectre story you've heard this weekend?
I think against Matt Nass, John Finkel actually stole Matt Nass's Nykthos and was able to kind of go off, which was kind of a beating.
Yeah, there was one blue-white deck in the field that was playing Temple of Silence, for Scry, it wasn't playing any black cards.
Right.
And I'm sorry, it was a blue deck that was blue devotion deck that was playing Scrylands, but he hit Thoughtseize.
And was able to cast it
I
off.
was able to cast it off of his blue-black Scryland Temple of Deceit.
I know that fans of Camille Cornelissen will want to know how he is getting on. He has Dazani down to 1 life. He has Stormbreath Dragon piling in turn after turn after turn. But Dazani is making flying blockers turn after turn after turn. So that's where we are in their game 3. Dazani currently 2-0 up in that one. Remember, Sam Black already through to play the winner of this match. And if Guillaume Wafatafa is going to win it from 2-0 down, we're going to be here a while.
Well, Aetherling does make it so these control matchups don't take as long as they used to. Concluding with Aetherling is a lot faster than concluding with Nephalia Dranyard.
Indeed. So Wafatafa up to 6 cards in hand now. Both players just generating huge card advantage in this one.
So despite the Stormbreath Dragon coming in, it sounds like Dazani was able to, complete his devotion to Thassa and
Get all of the manners.
Get his mana to the point where he was able to generate an unblockable attack and kill Camille Cornelissen and win 3-0 in that match.
So Jeremy Dazani now awaits the winner of Makahita Mahara and Paul Rietzel.
There's Wafo's chipping down at Pierre's Forces here with a Hero's Downfall and just a nice little Aetherling hit there.
Couple of Night Veil Specters there.
Yeah, I think against a blue deck with a bunch of mana on tap, you don't necessarily want to just play 2 spells at the exact same time. So Wafo may have wanted to counter one of them, but he did not have a counter spell in hand.
Wafatafa untaps, draws. It is Detention Sphere.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much. That is a
And-
stacked hand.
Interestingly, Dijon also was holding, is holding a negate, but has tapped required all of his blue manas
yeah,
to get those 2 into play.
I think he's just too far behind if he doesn't play the second Night Veil Spectre,
Sure.
that he doesn't really have much of a choice. But the Detention Sphere will make that a little unfortunate for him. Wafo deciding, I mean, he could kill the Bident, but the fact that the Spectres have kind of their own built-in Bident means that taking the 2-for-1 seems pretty hard to resist here. Wafotapa does like value.
He's like, "Meh."
I don't think he even waited for Wafotapa to target there. Not that it was a big surprise.
Not the TIE Binder Mage, are you sure? So Wafatafa now.
He's just hitting with Aetherling for 6, putting Dajen on down to a 2-turn clock.
Dajon draws. Has a negate, which doesn't do much against an onboard Aetherling, that's for sure. Is going to activate Mutavault and attack. Aetherling gets in the way. And Dajon's hand has really just disintegrated into not very much. Doomblade does get countered, but now Dajon is just the cupboard bear. Basic islands all the way.
He's basically trading a Mutavault for a card.
For,
which
yeah,
is
a
definitely worth it.
Mutavault and a negate for a card.
Yeah.
That card happened to have been an island.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is
Not
going to be
good.
tough. In Azorius Charm, if Wafo's in more trouble, he could even use this to gain 8 life right here off the Aetherling, but life linking it up. But I don't think he even really needs to do that right here.
And that Sphinx's Revelation has sat there since the opening hand.
I don't think it's getting cast this game,
No,
actually.
it really isn't. And there you go. So Guillaume Wafatapa gets on the board. The comeback begins. It is 2-1 to Pierre Dajon. We will get you now as fast as we can to the front table because Paul Rietzl and Makihita Mahara are still in action. They are in game 4. And Rietzl with his Orzhov mid-range deck is trying to take out Mahara. And just as we speak, it goes to 2-2. So we're going to bring you a game 5 between Makihita Mahara and Paul Rietzl. Great stuff. That's been an epic match already, and you will get to see the conclusion of that live right now. So congratulations to both of them. Already through to the top 4. Jeremy Desani of France, 3-0. Terrific over Camille Cornelsen. And Sam Black, 3-1. Kind of felt he was an underdog against Kentaro Yamamoto, but Yamamoto is out. Black is through to face the winner of Wafatapa and Dajon. Desani awaits the winner of these two gentlemen. Paul Rietzl on the left of your screen, Mahara on the right.
Yeah, I mean, although Sam Black was an underdog, he did have quite the brain trust working for him last night. You know, trying to figure out that matchup and apparently, you know, tweaking things. You know, finding small edges that they could work. Let me ask you a question, Luis. When you guys were playtesting this format, how many of these top 8 decks did you guys find in your playtesting?
So the only deck that we didn't really, completely did not expect out of here was the mono black devotion deck. We hadn't, you know, Pack Rat is not exactly a card that we tested a whole lot of.
Sure.
But we played with the blue decks. The white black deck kind of came along a little later, and this is a little more mid-rangey. Like it's got the 4 Soldier of the Pantheon, 4 Precinct Captains, along with all the kind of control cards.
Right.
Like when I played against Paul and he went Soldier of the Pantheon, Precinct Captain, Read the Bones as his curve. That's not a curve that we had a whole lot of experience playtesting against, but we spent a lot of time testing the various devotion decks because we thought that was kind of the most powerful thing going on in the format.
Right, but you never a mono black devotion deck?
No. I mean, we took a look at the lists, but it didn't strike us as what we wanted to be doing.
Right. Is there any way to possibly imagine a mono white devotion deck, which is the one thing we did not really see at this event?
Have a think about that as we look at Paul Rietzl there, 28 years old. He's a gold pro. Now, that basically means he gets to play at every pro tour. He's qualified automatically, 251 lifetime pro points. That's well on the way to Hall of Fame territory, as is those 4 pro tour top 8s, including here. The champion of Amsterdam 2010 with lots of small white creatures. And BDM, you were saying he starts with the small white creatures with Soldier of the Pantheon, but then he really kind of goes all the way.
This is Soldier of Pantheon into Desecration Demon.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, not the normal curve.
So that's Paul Rietzl. On the other side of the table, you have Makihita Mahara. We'll take a look at him. A little bit older, 31, also a gold pro. And this, his 5th Pro Tour top 8. We've got a Hall of Famer sitting along beside me. We've also got the historian beside me. Let's not be coy here. Mahara's 5th Pro Tour top 8, that's a massive deal in terms of Hall of Fame.
And when you factor in a World Championships, a Team World Championship, success on the Grand Prix level, you know, it's hard not to imagine my 2014 ballot without him. He was on my 2013 ballot.
Yeah, I mean, I voted for him this year also.
Yeah,
so.
we all did. So.
At this point, the extra top 8 doesn't make me not want to vote for him.
It's like, I don't know, it's too many top 8s.
Yeah. And even Paula voted for him after we did the Paula Worlds 2006 there.
Oh, yeah.
So Mahara nods his head and says, yes, I'm ready for the All the Marbles matchup against Paul Rietzl. And he begins with a Mutavault. And we will see a straightaway into acceleration. Mahara has the potential to do crazy amounts of mana super fast. And that's part 1 of it. Here's an Elvish Mystic. And Rietzl says, I know what that thing does to me later on. Let's get it dead with Doomblade.
And Paul pretty happy to draw an Orzhov Guildgate there. He kept a hand with, it looks like without white mana, which was a solid hand, but oh.
Hello. Burning Tree Emissary. Burning Tree Emissary into Voyaging Satyr. Chance to untap a land again. More acceleration. And already big power and threat on the board from Mahara.
Take a look at what's left in Mahara's hand after that.
Pelucranos. Whoa.
Pelucranos, Temple of Abandon, and a Stomping Ground. He does not have the Nykthos.
He doesn't, and if Paul doesn't kill Voyaging Satyr, then Pelucranos is coming down here, but Paul's got a, you know, kind of a tough spot here. He doesn't have any of his smaller creatures, no Soldier of the Pantheon, no Precinct Captain. So and the ghost councils that he's got in his hand aren't likely to be cast all that soon. So those Burning Tree Shamans or emissaries could actually attack him for a relevant amount of damage.
Yeah, and they would take a look at Paul Rietzel's hand.
Yeah, and he's a long way from those 2 Obsidats right now.
You know, do you put yourself? He Doombladed the Elvish Mystic. Do you see him using another Doomblade here on the Satyr? Yes.
Well, apparently, yeah. I think so. I think even though Paul can actually take 12 damage off the emissaries and stabilize still, it is a little tough, but I think that you do have to make that play even in the face of 2 2/2s attacking you.
So I think we'll see a Temple of Abandon here.
And let's see what the Scry does. Now, top or bottom? I'm going to leave it right there. So what might that be, Louise?
I don't think it's a non-Nykthos land. I don't think Mihara's got a huge incentive to keep just like a normal land. So it's either a Nykthos or a relevant spell. I mean, which that still leaves a fair amount of possibilities.
Sure.
But I do think he would have been like a Garruk or an Arbor Colossus, something that costs 5 or more mana.
Right.
So that narrows down a little more. And I think he probably would have put like an elf, a random elf on the bottom, like a Caritator elf, because. So I think that actually does make it the most likely that it's a Nykthos or a powerful spell. So that actually narrows the range down a little more tightly, and Paul can't be happy about it regardless of which one it is.
No, and Paul's hand continues to clog up with the top end of his curve. He's got an Elspeth Sun's Champion in hand now to go with those 2 Obsidats.
So the hand continues to burn there as Paul doesn't really have a whole lot he can cast.
Yeah.
He does have a Pithing Needle in hand, which I assume he's going to at some point name Polychronos.
Yeah, he might have to. He really wants it for Garruk here. Like, that's what it's for in the matchup. But
Sure.
But if there's a Polychronos in play and Paul's behind, I don't really know what his choice he has.
Sure.
And
So again, Pithing Needle, that means activated abilities cannot be activated of the named card unless it's a mana ability. It's the little clause on that one.
Paul also has to decide whether he really is trading a Mutavault for a Burning Tree. I don't think he is. And if he's not, he actually might as well attack. It's kind of funny to be attacking when you're taking a lot more damage on the backswing, but if you're not going to block, I mean, no blocks, no attacks is not a great way to go through life.
So here is Pithing Needle.
6-drop Garruk.
Yeah, it looks like Garruk is being named.
Yeah, and just wanted to make sure he knew the name, but
I do like that, you can say 6-drop Garruk, and if there's only one, that narrows it. That means that that's acceptable. But
No, it's Garruk, a Planeswalker.
yeah.
Was Mara giving him some information there? And so let's find out what he put on top.
looks like a Xenagos the Reveler.
Yep. Ritzel says, "You're right, Makihita. You look like you've seen a ghost."
2/2.
Yeah, I think Paul, if he doesn't draw planes this turn or an untapped white source this turn, which 7 of his white sources potentially are not untapped, I think that he's going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
And he sends in for
Red Zone
6.
Smash.
Makes a Satyr token.
All right, this is a big turn for Paul.
What have you got, Paul? Precinct
Captain.
Captain.
Another double white card. That's going to make things almost impossible for Paul at this point, since he's not going to be able to play a spell this turn. And Makihito is going to be able to play a Polychronos and attack for 8 next turn with all his tokens, plus his Burning Trees.
It's gone the distance, but something extraordinary is now going to have to happen if Paul Ritzel can extend this 5th game beyond another couple of turns. He's looking at Precinct Captain, Elspeth, Sun's Champion, and 2 Obsidat. He attacks Xenagos down to 1 with his Mutavault. Passes the turn. The red zone is bare on Ritzel's side of the board. Mahara, token, smash. There are the tokens, but they won't be there for long because Ritzel will not be there for long. Here's Polychronos. Paul Ritzel draws for what should be the final time. He extends the hand, and Makihito Mahara of Japan rolls on. He was in the top 8 of the last Pro Tour in San Diego at Dragon's Maze. He is into the final 4 again here, defeating Paul Ritzel by 3-2. And that means with Desani through over Cornelsen, Black through over Yamamoto, and now Mahara over Ritzel. It is just a case of finding out which second Frenchman will be in the top 4 of Pro Tour Theros 2013. Will it be Guillaume Wafatapa with his Esper control deck, or will it be Islands all the way with Pierre Dajon? That's the question. There you see the two players, Waffatapa on the left, Dajon on the right, and the players are about to begin their game 4. So Dajon picks up his hand. They've waited patiently for us and for you at home so that we can see all the action of game 4 and maybe a game 5. And
Get
we
underway
begin
with a 1-drop.
So one looked like it might have been a Cloudfin Raptor. So we'll soon see.
I think that might be a judge's familiar.
Okay. Very hard to tell from this angle, but we'll get that to you in a mo.
See the Jip moving into position.
Yeah, definitely judge's familiar if it's attacking before any other creatures get cast. Or it's a very aggressive Cloudfin Raptor.
Yeah. Just practicing, taking some warm-up swings.
Yeah.
And that's tied by the mange coming down on turn 2.
I mean, we didn't get to see the first couple games, but if Waffle doesn't have a turn 4 verdict, and it looks like he's got a verdict in hand, if he doesn't have a turn 4 verdict, you know, this matchup does seem like it could be pretty tough. So
It was indeed judge's familiar for Dajon on turn 1 as we see a Scry land.
So let's take a look at what is sitting in Dajon's hand after he played his 2 early drops. He's got another Tidebinder Mage, a Thassa God of the Sea, a couple islands, and a freshly drawn Night Veil Spectre.
Indeed.
And on the other side of the table, always more importantly, what's in the control player's hand?
Sure.
What is he holding?
Does he indeed have that Supreme Verdict? Yes, he does. A Sphinx's Revelation, which he didn't use at all from his opening hand to win game 3, Doomblade Divination, and 3 land. So here's Thassa. The blue god comes down.
And that's going to make things really tough for Wafo, since if he doesn't have a detention sphere right away, which it looks like he's not going to, Thassa's going to get a hit in once Dajon plays a card next turn, which means that even though Wafo verdicts, Thassa just still sits there, and that makes things really tough on Wafo. He's not able to really get on the board quite as much as he would like, just because no matter what he does, Thassa's just sitting there threatening to smack him for 5.
Also, notice the way Dajon put his pen on top of his library there just to remind himself to scry at the start of his turn, thanks to Thassa. Thassa, rather. Sorry.
You're clearly not devoted enough.
I'm so common.
You're worried about the Sea God's revenge?
Yeah.
I'm always worried about Sea God's revenge.
Is that when you eat bad shrimp? And there's Tidebinder Mage.
So Thassa is real.
So Yum does get to save 8 damage here if he wants to cast a Doomblade, but I think he's just going to take the 8 and then Supreme Verdict and kind of reset the board here.
Another land for Dajon. He hasn't seen any of his 3 Mutavaults yet in this one. All islands all the way for him. Waffatapa with 8 cards you see there in hand. Takes...
Let's take a look at Thassa.
The judge is familiar. Pay 1 on the Supreme Verdict. I'll decline.
So we're back to just Thassa on the board now. Judge's Familiar and Night Veil Spectre is the hand for Dajon. Waffatapa really in the blink of an eye down to 8, and here we see Master of Waves as well in hand.
And Thassa walks among the mortals again.
Yeah, because Night Veil Spectre and Judge's Familiar, that's 4 devotion right there. Waffatapa has Detention Sphere. He's drawn.
He drew the Azorius Charm, which will actually keep him alive for the turn
Azorius
here.
Charm,
He can throw the Night Veil Spectre back on top and then deactivate
and take
Thassa.
take the creature out of combat.
But he's still really far behind. Just being at 1 against...
1.
So he's got to, like, Doomblade Judge's Familiar and Azorius Charm the Night Veil Spectre. But then with a Thassa in play, at some point, you know, Pierre's going to just hit 5 devotion again, and there's not much Waffle can do about it. He needs to find a Detention Sphere and a way to kill every single other creature Pierre plays for the rest of the game.
While being at 1.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the Judge's Familiar still attacks 2 here, right?
He's going to pass the turn. Dajon looks, scry off Thassa.
pushes a card.
And then moves to his draw step.
Yeah, there's also not to mention the fact that he gets to scry every single turn.
Master of Waves, he says. D'Argent right on the verge of taking out a Pro Tour champion here in the quarterfinals and setting up a semi-final matchup against Sam Black. Waffataba says, sure. You can have 1, 4, 6, yeah, just, a bunch of tokens.
Yeah.
6.
It's an almost irrelevant number because the master itself is lethal.
Yeah.
But,
and then I would like to attack with these 3.
so you lead with the Doomblade on the Judge's Familiar just because if you lead with Azorius Charm and you get made to pay 1 more, then I guess that would kill the Judge's Familiar anyway. So either way, he's going to get both the creatures off the board here.
Right.
But
And then put that Night Veil Spectre back on top.
man, make it so you can't scry next turn because you're probably just going to leave that there anyway. But Waffles needs to draw an answer to Master
So-
Waves this turn.
Dejan is empty-handed.
Sphinx's Revelation has come into hand for Waffatapa.
So I guess he can cast Divination and hope to draw a Doomblade or Detention Sphere, or some other cheap removal spell.
That's what he's going for. Divination, draw 1. He drew Supreme Verdict. And a land, and he's shaken the hand because he cannot get the job done. And Pierre Dajon is your 4th semi-finalist here at Pro Tour Theros. He defeats Guillaume Waffatapa by 3 games to 1. And so our semi-final lineup is fixed. We have, first of all, Makihisa Mahara of Japan defeating Paul Ritzel by 3-2. He will play Jeremy Desani of France, who defeated Camille Cornelison 3-0. Then we have Sam Black of the United States taking out Kentaro Yamamoto 3-1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the booth. Rich, BDM, LSV, all the initials. Why don't I get initials? It's not fair. And finally, you've just seen Pierre Dajon take out Guillaume Waffataba of France. Louis, summarize the morning for us. What have we seen today in terms of Theros standard overall from our 4 quarterfinals?
We've seen some devotion to blue since all the blue decks advanced here. We now have 3 blue decks and another red-green devotion deck. So looks like devotion is the big winner here.
It's all about the gods, it turns out. So that is the quarterfinal action. BDM, highlight for you of the morning?
Seeing Mahara get through to the semifinals, sort of continuing to make his case for the Hall of Fame and seeing if he can bring his own, with so many teams. I mean, obviously we love the teams working on these formats, but it's always also really nice to see like a brewer at work, someone who's like, well, how am I going to attack
the
this?
team of
how
me,
am
myself,
I
and
going to
I.
beat Channel Fireball and Star City and Team Face-to-Face Games and TCG Player? How do I do that? And seeing if he comes up with something.
To be fair, when Mahara's working with Yuya and a bunch of other strong Japanese players, then they have their own team. They're maybe not quite as well publicized.
Sure.
Well, it's been a terrific set of quarterfinals. We have a fantastic halftime show for you lined up. Going to throw you back to the news desk and your host, Mr. Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey guys, welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe here with Zach Hill. Zach, how's it going, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah,
I just watched some amazing magic.
We did. We got to see some pretty awesome stuff, and from a lot of different angles too. I think that's one of the things that's really defined this tournament has been the amount of the vast differences in the ways that the decks actually go about winning.
No, that's for sure. We've seen a lot of different angles, but we've seen one very, very effective angle, and that is playing blue mana symbols and Thassa, God of the Sea.
That's right.
I think that's working out very well for our players, as I think all of those decks actually advanced into the semifinals.
That's right. Now, what we want to do here is, Zach, you've actually had a chance to sit down and actually work through a little bit about some of the cards that were coming out of Theros and how they affected this tournament.
Yeah, exactly. A thing that happens sometimes, and this was really interesting to me now that I'm out back in the real world again playing cards, a lot of the time a new large set comes out and it doesn't really do that much to shake up the metagame. There's so many established archetypes and so many established things to do that you see new sets playing a lot more of a support role. What I noticed about this top 8 though is that every single one of the decks had a Theros card it played 4 copies of that really really help make the deck work.
Oh, wow.
And historically, that's just not something you see all that often.
No, people are definitely skeptical. You know, the change is hard.
Yeah,
right?
change is very hard.
When you've been playing with the same cards in the same deck for a year, maybe even up to 2 years, if it was a really good card that was popular since the beginning, it's going to take a lot to have something to come in and knock it off. Why don't we take a look at some of those cards that you actually have highlighted for us here?
Yeah, so we do have the gods.
We do have the gods,
and,
but that is actually not, now some of these did show up here.
Yeah, I think in fact all 4 of those showed up in the top 8.
They did, but this is not what you actually highlighted. So why don't we move on to the next slide here, and we're going to take a look at, so what was the first card that came up for you?
So the first cards I wanted to look at were actually the first list that we saw. We were watching Mahara versus Rietzel, so I wanted to take a look at Soldier of the Pantheon, which was a card that was central to Rietzel's deck and really informed the construction of the entire list.
So get a look at Soldier of the Pantheon there. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Soldier of the Pantheon, when you look at Paul's deck list, he's playing 12 dual lands. And one of the things you look at, okay, so what's so important about this? It turns out he needs double white for Precinct Captain and double black for Hero's Downfall, as well as Ghost Council, or Obzedat Ghost Council. But one of the things that the reasons the deck works and why we've seen it be so successful, I mean, Pat Chapin got, I think, 9th or 10th place, 9th place to this tournament, Paul top-8'd, is that it's able to play a really powerful, aggressive game with Soldier on the first turn, putting pressure on the opponent. That gives him time to use his removal spells and his Read the Bones to play his late game cards. Without Soldier of the Pantheon, this entire deck wouldn't make sense, because it's also integral to its ability to play defense against cards like Voice of Resurgence, Loxodon Smiter, Burning Tree Emissary, Fleece Mainline.
Yeah, Fleece Mainline, which is a huge one, really tough to deal with.
Yeah, so I mean, Soldier is kind of the centerpiece of Paul's entire deck. It's doing a lot of very valuable work.
That's really interesting, because I think if you went through the deck list, that wouldn't jump out to you right away.
Oh, and I mean, I don't think it would. I mean, you can always say, well, maybe you play Dryad Militant, but the problem about that is this is not an aggressive deck. I mean, it has 1/1 drop, it has 1/2 drop, and then it's playing a bunch of Desecration Demons and 5-mana Orjot cards.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, Read the Bones, 4 Heroes Downfall, 3 Doomblade. So, I mean, it's not a deck where it just floods the board with threats.
Right.
But what it tries to do with Soldier and Precinct Captain, being able to get a clock early and put the opponent in a reactive stance, means that all of a sudden Paul's late game threats can take over a game by themselves. And again, both Precinct Captain and Soldier of the Pantheon, incredibly effective on defense as well.
Yes.
A lot of control decks would have to play, Lightning Strikes, Mizium Mortars, Doomblades, other ways of dealing with threats. But Paul gets to just play his own threats that are even better on defense.
Which is, we saw that on camera too. When we were watching Paul play in the Swiss portion of the tournament, we saw Soldier of Pantheon play an absolutely critical role in applying early pressure, punishing Thought Seizes, punishing Read the Bones, that kind of thing. Why don't we take a look at our next slide here?
Yeah, so the next slide, I kind of went to his opponent again that we were looking at was Makihito Mahara and Pelukranos World Eater.
The big boy.
That's really been one of this tournament's breakout cards, but you see Mahara's deck. I mean, he has 4 Elvish Mystic, 4 Sylvan Caryatid, 4 Voyaging Satyr, and 4 Nykthos Shrine to decks next. So he's using a ton of mana every single turn. Of course, Satyr can untap Nykthos.
Right.
And
which is one of the most broken things that you can do, right?
Yeah, Nykthos is unbelievable. People were comparing it to Tolarian Academy. Frank Karsten wrote Tolarian Academy on his deck list.
And then scratched it off and wrote Nykthos. It was really funny.
Exactly. But the thing is, you've got Garrick. But aside from that, you need something to do with all that mana.
Yeah.
Pelukranos can kill your opponent's entire team.
Yeah, it can be a wrath for green somehow.
Yeah, this is a green deck that between Pelukranos and Domri Raid has no problem killing creatures. And a sweet little combo out of the sideboard, if you use Wasteland Viper when Pelukranos is attacking, all of a sudden it gains Death Touch.
Okay.
And then you just start dealing 1 damage to whatever you want and kill it all.
Mow down the whole team.
Exactly. So, I mean, Pelukranos central enough to this deck that Mahara is willing to play 4 copies of a legendary creature.
Yeah, that's incredible. All right, let's take a look at our next slide here.
Yeah, so I kind of was going through just deck after deck after deck, and something that you saw, 3 copies in the top 8. Thassa, God of the Sea, really a breakout card of this tournament. I mean, I was talking to Tom Martell yesterday, and he said if he could play 6 copies, he would.
Wow, that's incredible. This is a legendary enchantment creature here, right?
Legendary enchantment creature, and it's indestructible, so it's probably not dying that much.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's just so good. I mean, this card is inspiring people to play with, Judge's Familiar, Tidebinder Mage. Tidebinder Mage is a really good card, but you're normally thinking about it against red and green decks. People are leaving it in against black-white just for the ability to turn Thassa on so early. I mean,
Did not think I would see that before the weekend, and I did many times.
I didn't either. I mean, and we saw against Wafo Tapa, I mean, that card is attacking for 5 on turn 4 almost always. Night Veil Spectre, Bident of Thassa.
Yeah.
So, and really, it gives the deck the consistency it needs to be able to, some builds play 24, 25 lands, but it's really hard to get flooded. You almost always have a steady stream of threats. I mean, this card is probably the most successful card of Pro Tour Theros.
Yeah, its activated ability also a common finisher in the feature match area this weekend.
A finisher, and it threatens planeswalkers.
That's right. All right, let's take a look at our next one. Thassa, a breakout card for sure. And this one, it doesn't really deal with Thassa that well, but it deals with a lot of other things.
Deals with a lot of other cards. So we've seen Hero's Downfall, where there's actually 4 copies in Paul Rietzel's list. Hugely important to that deck. 4 copies in Kentaro's list. Very important, but the deck that I find it the most interesting in is actually in Guillaume Wafo Tapa.
Okay.
Now, he's a 3-color deck that manages to play the full 4 copies of Hero's Downfall.
Interesting.
And the interesting thing to me is almost every other blue-white deck we've seen plays 4 copies of Detention Sphere.
Okay.
A card that on the surface is very similar to Downfall. It's a 3-mana card that can deal with basically any creature or with planeswalkers. The Sphere also has the ability of being able to deal with multiple copies of the same card. Nevertheless, Guillaume decided to play 4 Hero's Downfall.
Interesting.
A thing that Luis Scott Vargas and I were talking about earlier with Detention Sphere is it forces the deck to operate at sorcery speed, and it makes the deck vulnerable to cards like Abrupt Decay, Cyclonic Rift, just anything, Vraska the Unseen, anything that can deal with an enchantment. Destructive Revelry, we saw in the feature match area earlier. It gives your opponent an out to your principal removal spell, and an out that's really hard to play around because so much of your deck operates at sorcery speed. With Hero's Downfall, not only can Wafo Tapa save mana by killing planeswalkers and creatures at the end of his opponent's turn, which sets up very nicely the 4 copies of Jace, Architect of Thought.
Yes.
He doesn't have to worry about getting kind of re-raised with an answer to an enchantment.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I've had that. I really love how simple that card is. I love cards that have just a very straightforward line of text on them, and especially when they're really powerful, like Hero's Downfall. I expect to see that a lot over the course of the next few years in Standard.
Yeah,
let's take a look at a Stormbreath Dragon.
In this card, a centerpiece of Camille Cornelison's deck in the top 8. Now, we saw Pelucranos serving as an outlet for Nykthos Shrine to Nyx.
Right.
In this deck, which is mono-red, Stormbreath Dragon, really the principal way to use all that mana. Now, you're not going to complain too much about a 5-mana 4/4 flyer with protection from white and haste in the first place.
You would have me sold at that point.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're able on the very next turn, thanks to Nykthos, to be able to activate the monstrous ability and deal huge amounts of damage. I mean, 3+1/+1 counters plus a Stormseeker effect. Damage to your opponent equal to the number of cards in their hand. That's really the principal way that this deck is able to abuse Nykthos.
Yeah, and that's a key thing here, right? Each of these decks needs to have a way that if they are able to go off with Nykthos, that they can do huge broken things, because sometimes you make a ton of mana and you look at your hand and you're like, I don't really have anywhere to go with this, but these are the type of outlets that these decks need.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you're not using a bunch of mana to cast Ash, Zealot, and Boros Reckoner.
Right.
But cards like Ember Swallower, Perforos, and all more Theros cards and Stormbreath Dragon really are what enable this entire deck to function.
I think that's pretty sweet that we have a deck that uses absurd amounts of mana to put into a dragon. I didn't think we'd have that either. Let's take a look at our next slide. It is Thoughtseize.
So this is the card I think that everybody was talking about.
Everybody's been talking about Thoughtseize.
Yeah, when Theros came out. So I think it's fitting to kind of conclude with this card. Again, centerpiece of Rietzel's deck, designed again by Team Star City Games in Chapin. But the card, or the deck that I think this fits the most appropriately in is Kentaro Yamamoto's Mono Black deck. Now, Mono Black is a deck that people have kind of wanted to be good for a long time.
It feels like every new set, there's a rumblings of, is the Mono Black deck back?
Right, and you know, when we had Mutilate, that wasn't enough. But Thoughtseize gives black answers to all kinds of cards that it doesn't have answers to otherwise. I mean, this is an enchantment block. Black not good at dealing with enchantments, but Thoughtseize means that all of a sudden, you know, cards like Gods that black literally has no answers to, it's able to deal with very effectively. And you know, paying life to Thoughtseize and Read the Bones is why a card like Grey Merchant of Asphodel is so good in Yamamoto's deck. But I genuinely believe that without Thoughtseize, you could never consider a mono black strategy.
Because there would be a whole subsection of threats that you just would have no answers to.
You just have no versatility against, you know, really planeswalkers. I mean, you have Hero's Downfall, but they still get to use their ability. Indestructible creatures like Gods, powerful enchantments, good artifacts, and even stuff like Trading Posts that we only saw on the fringe. I mean, you're just hopeless against it. But Thoughtseize gives you answers to all of that, in addition to being just one of the most powerful cards ever printed. And I mean, there are several decks in this top 8 that I don't think you could even consider without access to Thoughtseize.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Zach, and I think it is fitting. I've noticed the same thing over the years, that when a new set comes out, people are a little hesitant. Eventually, once somebody does well with it, then they all jump on it. You know, now it's like, now we're running this card. This card's
always
sweet.
knew Thundermaw Hellkite was
that was good the whole time, right? You know, and hindsight is definitely 2020 when it comes to this kind of thing. But it really does say a lot to the power level of the cards in Theros, that here at the top 8, at the highest possible level, in the earliest major tournament, it's represented in every single deck.
Yeah, I think players' willingness to experiment was really rewarded at this tournament.
All right, so what I want to do now is I want to send you guys to a quick video. I'm going to be bringing in a special guest for an interview, and I have a lot of special guests lined up for you throughout the course of our little, and we call it the halftime show here. Halftime maybe isn't fully accurate, but heading from the quarterfinals to the semi. So for right now, though, take a look at the tweets that we received leading into the event. And welcome back to the booth. Marshall Sutcliffe here. We're at the relative halfway point. We call it halftime, Aaron.
Sure.
Of the top 8 here in Pro Tour Theros, and I have with me Aaron Forsyth, Director of R&D down at Wizards of the Coast. Welcome to the desk, Aaron.
Thank you.
It's always nice to see you out here. I always see you poking around, looking at things, kind of getting a feel for how your creations have affected the tournament scene out here.
I have an easy job when I come here, just kind of hang out, watch, talk to people, make sure everything's going well, get some suggestions, get ideas, get feedback.
Yeah, but we always tag you into the booth a few times, and I saw you guys did you and Ian Duke had an R&D Q&A out on the floor as well.
Right, that was very cool. Lots of good questions from the audience, and people want to know about how we make cards and what changes we do and what we're thinking about, and it was really cool to interact with the people here at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, I saw a lot of good questions out there. Now, leading into the tournament, what kind of expectations did you have for the Theros cards and how they would affect the tournament scene?
Well, whatever expectations we had, I could tell you that this totally, exceeded all of them.
Oh, is that right?
It did. We were hoping to see maybe a devotion deck, maybe a god or two show up, and the fact that
a few brave souls.
Right. I feel like the word of the day is devotion.
Yes.
Like that mechanic just kind of blew me away in how much people did with it. I don't think in the tournaments leading up to this, the few standard tournaments that had happened prior to this, that we saw anything like that showing up to any degree. But the pros really put in the work and explored all the angles and came up with some awesome decks. And I think we see like all of the key pillars of Theros showing up here. Monstrous is showing up,
Yes.
lots of scry, you know, legendary creatures, gods, other devotion cards.
Yeah, the gods and their tools have been shown.
Yeah, the
up a lot.
weapons, almost every weapon is showing up with its god. I guess there was no bow in the Nylea deck, but other than that, all three of the other gods that were in the top 8 showed up with their weapons.
Yeah,
in tow.
Thassus Biden has claimed
Yeah.
many victims this
Right,
weekend.
right,
and
right.
A lot of card draws off of that. Let's take a look at a slide we have up here. We were just talking about the gods, Aaron, and we have a full 4 out of 5 represented in the top 8 here.
Right, that really makes me happy. We put a ton of work in on these. They were very hard cards to make. Obviously, indestructible enchantments that turn into huge creatures that can start attacking really quickly, plus have other abilities on top of that, or things you don't want to screw up. Like it sounds like a 3/3 indestructible, unblockable, or a 3-mana 5/5 rather.
Yeah, I'm getting very interested in this
indestructible,
card. The more
unblockable. It's
words
like
you say.
well, how can you print that? You know, so we put a ton of effort into making sure they were in a good spot that was tempting and would lead you to explore. You know, what weird cards do I need to enable this, and hope that they would spawn some decks. And this has just exceeded our expectations for sure.
Yeah, it's
that,
pretty
that
incredible.
4 of the 5 of them have shown up in the top 8.
Yeah, it's unbelievable seeing 4 of them. I think that Thassa has been the most popular and the most successful here at this particular event. Would that line up with your expectation if you were to look at, say, all 5 of the gods from a constructed standpoint?
I think so. Thassa and Perforos are the 2 that I think we kind of had tagged internally as the real deal, like the ones that had the most support behind them. Obviously, just because Perforos, can kill your opponent really quickly with his ability, and Thassa. I mean, a lot of Thassa's power is that her cohort Master of Waves. They both reward you so heavily for flooding the board with blue mana symbols, and they're just a 1/2 punch that is super hard to beat.
Yeah.
I mean, Erebos has the Grey Merchant, so other gods have other reasons to reward you for devotion, and they all have Nykthos, obviously. But we thought that the blue 1/2 punch of Thassa, Master of Waves, was legit, and we were happy to see that it showed up.
Yeah, and it certainly has. Now, a quick word here about Nykthos. We've seen it show up in varying degrees. There's a few people out there that are playing it kind of for value, right? Like, oh, well, we're pretty close to mono red, or we've got a lot of symbols, so we'll use it to gain an occasional edge. Then you have people like Makahito Mahara who say, I want to build a deck around this card, and they went fully all in on
Right,
it.
4 copies plus some Voyaging Satyrs to abuse it even further.
Because doing it once in one turn isn't enough. So what do you think about that? Is that what you expected to see from Nykthos?
No, I mean, we knew it was really powerful. We played it a lot. The card started out as not legendary first, but we got to the point where it's obvious that you can't have tons of these on the board at once. It's just way too insane. We thought that we could make it legendary now that with the legend rule change, so that each players weren't going to be strip mining each other with the legend rule. So it'd be okay to make a legendary land, which we haven't done in a while.
Yeah.
But we thought it would only show up. I guess we thought it would show up more in the line of how the black and the blue decks are using it, like a copy here and there. Mm-hmm. When we changed it to legendary, most of our decks that looked like Cornelison's big red deck, we kind of stopped playing those because we had assumed that we're not going to be running 4 copies necessarily anymore. So, maybe we need to go back and look at that again, because it looks like 4 copies is certainly a way to go, especially in the green deck. It's really impressive. You can do some really insane things.
There's so many crazy
Garrick and Pelucranos and stuff like that. So
yeah, we've seen some absolutely absurd turns from Makahito Mahara out of that deck, especially with Pelucranos. And it's got to be pretty cool for you to, because you got to remember, guys at home, that Aaron worked on this, a couple
2 years ago? Yeah.
This was, so you're like, oh yeah, Pelucranos, I remember him.
Right, I remember him and like the eight different versions of him that we tried along the way to get to the one there was. That's true for a lot of these cards. But
yeah, but it's got to be sweet for you to see things like that when they pile up, right? When you're seeing the gods, you're seeing Pelucranos, you're seeing Nykthos. These are all unique new cards that didn't exist before, and now all of a sudden they're littering the top 8, and you can tell that Theros has made a huge impact What does that mean as you look forward to the next 2 sets from the Theros block? Like, are you kind of like, I wonder if these ones are going to be able to keep up, or are you like, wait till they say this
No, I
one?
think what's good is that a lot of the next 2 sets, which are Born of the Gods and Journey into Nyx, a lot of what they're doing is playing into the themes that already were set up in Theros. So it's great to see that there's a foothold for all that stuff already. That it's not going to be like, hey guys, we made more, more heroic and monstrous and devotion cards. What do you think? Like, no one plays those cards now, so no thank you.
Yeah.
And instead, the decks are already going to be there, and you're going to get to make them better and make some tweaks to them, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the what I want to mention, the biggest thing I'm happy with is that this Pro Tour is standard. Last year, this Pro Tour, when Ravnica came out, this Pro Tour was modern.
Right.
But now that we switched to 4 in the season, we figured we could have 2 standard ones, so we put one at the beginning and one at the end. So, we didn't get to see Return to Ravnica have this kind of impact on the pro stage that we did here, and it's just great to see. I mean, I loved Innistrad.
Yes.
But
I'm a big fan
little
of that
tired
myself.
of some of those cards at this point. 2 years in, we've seen enough Lingering Souls and Snapcaster Mages. It was time for some fresh blood, and Theros has really stepped up to fill the void.
Yes.
And it's super exciting.
It really has. Well, Aaron, thanks a lot for taking some time to chat with us, and of course your fans adore
And it's
you.
time to draft.
Yes, it is. I'll be right behind you.
All right.
Got a little more work to do here. For now, though, I'm going to send you guys to another Twitter video. This is the day 1 tweets to give you kind of a feel for what people were tweeting here from Dublin during day 1. And welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe here, and I have another special guest with me. It's Christine Sprankle. Christine, quite an outfit you have on here.
Yep.
What are you dressed up as right now?
I am dressed up as Eternal Witness, who recently got reprinted in Modern Masters.
Yeah, you must have been happy about that. So, Christine,
pretty.
you are a cosplayer.
Yes.
Can you tell us, I mean, this is the kind of thing that, like, the people that know what cosplaying is, they know it, they love it, they see, they get the pictures, or they do it themselves.
Yeah.
But the people that don't, they're like, what just walked by?
What is she doing?
What is she doing,
Yeah.
right? So can you give us a little overview on what cosplaying is?
Cosplay is, for short, costume role play. It's not quite LARPing.
It's not quite LARPing?
Yeah, LARPing, live action role playing.
Okay, so you're approaching the LARP threshold?
We're not quite there.
But you're not there,
We're
okay.
not there. And pretty much it's a very creative way to show your, self-express yourself
Mm-hmm.
for your love of whatever, game, cartoon, anime that you really like.
The thing that you're really into.
Yes.
Right, because I've seen people cosplay everything from video game characters to TV shows
Yes.
to magic cards, which is kind of
Yes.
your specialty. You're sort of the spearhead for that movement.
Yeah.
But I've seen, it's anything that you're really into,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's just
anything.
something that you love is
Yeah,
kind
just
of the
that
key.
passion.
Yeah.
It's just literally at the forefront.
Because I always talk about this for magic in general. Because one of the things, if somebody asks me, because they'll a lot of times I'll be at the airport, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, you're sitting down, right? Because it's like I do this commentary,
Yeah.
right, for Magic the Gathering, and I tell them that it's a strategy card game, and they're like, okay. But when somebody actually knows what Magic is, but they just kind of don't get why people are so into it,
Yeah.
I actually tell them that it's because it's a mode of self-expression,
Yeah.
right? It's like if
Exactly.
I'm a red player, I'm like, these are what I think are sweet, right?
Yeah.
Now, from your perspective, you're really into the mythos, the artwork. Like, what is the thing that draws you in the most?
For like Magic or just cosplay?
For Magic.
For Magic, it's definitely like the lore. Like when I was walking around as Elspeth yesterday, somebody was like, "Where's your giant spear?" And then they're like, "Well, why do you have a spear?" And I was like, "Well, traveled over."
But they were asking you as Elspeth.
Yes.
Like, why do you have a spear now
Yes.
instead of your sword?
Yeah.
And this is the stuff that interests you.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and he was blown away when I actually could tell him the entire story. And he was like, I didn't even know that. I've been playing Magic for the past almost 9 years, and I had no idea there was so much backstory to it.
Yeah, and there is. It's out there.
Very, very in depth.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth, and it's funny because I think a lot of us, especially out here, you know, we're at the Pro Tour, we're in Dublin. This is the hardcore tournament crowd.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, these are the people that want to win, 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 you know?
Yeah,
and
it's
sometimes they're like,
tense.
yeah, that's nice artwork, hit you with this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there is a whole lot more going on with the game, and I think that you tap into a whole other area of
Yeah.
that very strongly. Now, you couldn't bring the spear because of the airplane, right? Like, did you tell the guy that?
Yeah, I
Were you like, oh, it wouldn't fit on the plane?
Yeah, like when I stand up, it like reaches my just the sword, not even with the spear shaft connected. It reaches my chin, which is about 5'3". And then with the spear shaft, it's almost 10 feet tall.
Okay, yeah.
So
but I mean, if you're in Elspeth mode, like, can you really just tell the guy, it wouldn't fit on the airplane?
Well, sometimes
Or is there do you try to say like, when I planeswalked, it got left behind?
No, what I tell him is I haven't been blessed by Helios yet.
Ah, there you go.
Or Helios, and you know he hasn't gifted me with it yet, so
Right.
I have to slay that Hydra. Haven't done it yet, so.
Yeah. Oh man, and there's some sweet artwork that you can use for reference.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about that I thought was really interesting is, so one of the tenets to this type of hobby, Magic the Gathering in general, cosplay as well, and things that we consider geeky, right? This sort of geek realm, is attention to detail. Right, these are people that get down into the nitty gritty, and you do. I mean, you have the attention to detail that you put into these to your cosplay is unbelievable. Can you tell us maybe an example of like is this leaf specifically chosen from a certain type of tree, or was it just on sale at the fabric store?
No, this one was really interesting. Was I actually there wasn't as much detail as I could see. Like the whole front chest plate there was none.
Now you're talking about, you're looking at the original artwork on
Yeah.
the card by Therese Nielsen.
Yes.
Okay.
And she's turned to the side, so you can't even see what her front is. And that's like another part of cosplay is you put a little bit of yourself in each costume.
So you designed that then from what you would think would fit into that?
Yeah, like
That's
I pretty
incredible.
And then from what I found out, a lot of the Magic artists, they love talking to you. They love to give you that little detail to like help you bring it to life.
So you have one of your outfits. How many do you have roughly?
Like in total, or like did I bring here?
Total.
Total, almost 12.
Okay, and they're all Magic?
All Magic.
Okay, so you have almost 12. Now I know one of them is Brainstorm.
Yes.
It's a Mercadian Masks,
Yes,
Brainstorm?
Mercadian Masks were really old.
I saw an interview with you where you said that you couldn't quite figure out exactly how the outfit would look because it's kind of a close-up picture, and you actually talked to the artist?
Yeah, he's actually on Twitter, and so I just asked him, I was like, well, what were you imagining while you were drawing it and painting it? And he goes, that's a good question. He was like, I don't know.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, like,
yeah, work with me
look at
here.
it now, what do you think? And he goes, and he just told me, and I pretty much just recreated what he told me on via Twitter. And then I sent him a picture, and he said he was blown away because it's amazing to see
and it's
in
how
life.
He felt
yeah,
it. Yeah, that's
he's
unbelievable.
just like,
because I think the thing that people need to realize, when Halloween comes around, some of us like to dress up, right? So we'll go down and throw on a thing, and we're like, hey, look, I'm Batman or whatever, right? And that's fine. But what you're doing is it's another level of that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look. And you guys can do this if you've seen, we just had a picture up of you as Elspeth, and you've got, like we said, you have 11 other ones besides that. If you look at pictures of Christine and then compare it to the art, like, I mean, are you just staring at the card for hours trying to like absorb exactly what's there? Because it's uncanny the level of detail that you get.
Yeah, like on Elspeth, and that's another problem. Like you'll have different forms of her, and so like
Yeah, she's come back a few times.
Yeah, so I just kind of pick and choose. I don't like go by just one. Like when people ask me like which one are you, I'm just Elspeth. Like I am just Elspeth. And you just have to pick and choose, and yeah, it's literally just staring at the work for hours. Like on Elspeth, I think I have around 700 googly eye rivets for the raised details on her.
This must be a cosplay, you know, like, how many googly eyed rivets do you have? I'm sitting at about 700.
Yeah, just about. So like when I walk, you hear like a weird little
clickety,
little jiggle, and you're like, what?
Is that like the armor?
Yeah.
Rubbing together.
Yeah, you just hear. So you just hear the little googly eyes just kind of like jiggle as I walk by.
All right, I have one last question here. What was the most difficult of all of your cosplay for Magic to build? Because I mean, these things must take you forever. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I'd have to say it would be Elspeth.
She's the one that you've put the most effort into.
Most effort, and she's all like, I'm never quite finished with her. It's like an forever work. Every costume is pretty much always a work in progress.
It's like a commander deck. The work is never done.
My favorite. But yeah, I literally never stop working on it. It's always like I'll learn like a new technique, and so I'll incorporate it into like an old costume, make it better, update it. But Elspeth, I've literally been working on for like 2 years, on and off.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in a good place, right? I mean, people have seen it and they love it.
Oh yeah, and like I still haven't made the new one technically. Like I still have to like update it and make the new one, and hopefully I'll start a Kickstarter soon to like really get the like actual chainmail, actual plastic, and really make it really legit.
Well, it was really cool having you out here at the Pro Tour. I know that people love it. They walk by and they're like, "Whoa, can I have a picture?" And every time I walk by, you're getting a picture with somebody, or you're signing something.
The reaction was like unreal. I can't describe it because their face, like when they see it,
and when it clicks,
it's a moment I think only me and that person really like get.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
love it.
All right, well, Christine, thanks for joining us up here at the booth. I am going to show you guys another video here real quick. This is going to be day 2 tweets. So these are from yesterday here from Dublin. When we come back, more stuff at the desk. Hey guys, welcome back to the news desk. Marshall Sutcliffe, and I am joined by 2 distinguished gentlemen. Zach Hill, they both laugh when I say it, and Tim Willoughby. So we've got, let's take a look at our players. We are actually, players are being seated currently, so we're gonna have you back down in the feature match area pretty soon here, but let's get a quick view of the players as at the bracket, as we go in. So Jeremy Dzani, he moves forward, defeating Camille Cornelissen in his quarterfinal match. Makihito Mahara defeats Paul Rietzel in a tight 5-game match. Moving down, we see Sam Black has defeated Kentaro Yamamoto, and on our last one, Pierre Deguin is going to be playing against Sam. Now, our feature match Let's take a look at Pierre again, actually. So Pierre, relative newcomer here. I mean, he's been around. He's got 26 lifetime pro points. It's not like he's, a new Magic player. But that said, this is his first Pro Tour top 8. He's got 1 Grand Prix top 8, and really looking to make a splash here.
Yeah, I mean, make a splash is actually a very appropriate term.
Yes, and we're going. Yeah, it is, and we're actually going to be taking a look at deck list in a minute. Let's take a look at our next player, though. I just want to run through the for Sam Black here. Sam. Well, he has been around for a while, and he's experienced a lot of success. This is his second Pro Tour top 8. He's a very popular Magic player in the community, and also, he's known to be a prolific deck builder. It's great to see Sam experience success as a player once again in the feature match. In the top 8 area himself.
Yeah, I mean, it is Team Star City. You've got to be excited for Sam himself to keep winning, because if Sam didn't, it's like, oh, who's going to make our decks?
Yes, that's right.
It's kind of funny because like the last couple of Star City events, he's been the progenitor of the big deck, and then other members on the team have done well with it. This one is actually more of a Kai and Gabriel Nassif deck, and he's
Sam,
the one
enjoying
the spec.
Yeah, he said he was working on other things, meaning other decks while it was going. Let's take a look at Makihito Mahara next. He's really put forth a bid here this weekend for his Hall of Fame. I mean, this is his 5th Pro Tour top 8. That is rare company. Once you get to that, BDM likens it to 3,000 hits in baseball for our American viewers. It's a milestone that you hit where it's kind of like, you're generally in the Hall of Fame if you get to 5. I mean, there's exceptions, but it's a pretty good lock.
Well, a Pro Tour title, especially, if he was able to get one of those, then you'd have World Champion, Team World Champion, Pro Tour Champion, and it's kind of hard to make an argument against a resume like that.
That's right, and he's only 2 matches away from having just that, Zach. Our last one. Let's bring him up now. Jeremy Dizani, and a relative newcomer as well. But Zach, you've had your eye on this player for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been tearing it up the last couple of years. Again, first place Grand Prix Lyon 2012. I mean, huge tournament. He's got 50 pro points, and he's really part of the team. We always talk about Channel Fireball Star City. This French team that came up with this particular version, the mono blue deck, has been killing it today.
Yes, they absolutely have. Now, so Jeremy Dizani, he's going to make up half of our feature match as we head into the semifinals. He's up against Makihito Mahara. Zach, tell us a little bit about Jeremy Dizani's deck, what it's trying to do, and how this matchup's going to play out.
Yeah, so I mean, this version of Jeremy Dizani's mono blue deck, very, very similar to the deck that Nassif and Kai came up with for Team Star City. It's, the mono blue devotion deck, unlike some of the other ones, it's got a kind of even split between, it's got 1 Binding Thassa, 2 Jace Architect of Thought, a lot of ways of drawing cards, Omen Speaker to stabilize, Cyclonic Rift to be able to, basically just make your opponent pick up all their permanents. But I mean, really the key to this deck, I think, is Thassa, God of the Sea, and Master of Waves. Master of Waves, just an incredibly large amount of power on a single card. I mean, 10 points worth of damage the turn after you cast it.
That's right.
Really is kind of the linchpin of this archetype.
Tim, what have you seen down in the feature match area from the likes of the mono blue deck?
Well, one of the cool things about this build, the mono blue deck, compared to some of the others, they're all running Cyclonic Rift to some extent, and that's really, really good against Devotion. This one has 1 copy of Disperse, though, and that, in some respects, are very similar cards to Cyclonic Rift. The big difference, though, Dizani can bounce his own Master of Waves and replay it and just get the biggest board imaginable.
All right, let's take a look at Makihito Mahara's deck a little quickly here. Zach, this one is similar in the sense that it's monocolored, but completely different direction.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Kibler yesterday, and we were kind of debating whether.
This deck.
Yeah, he thought it was the best. It was very Kibler.
We had him in the booth with you and Isaac, and he just couldn't stop talking about this deck.
But I mean, I can understand why, right? I mean, you're exploiting one of the craziest mana engines we've seen in Standard in recent memory, the combination Nykthos Shrine to Nyx and Voyaging Satyr. I mean, that can produce gargantuan amounts of mana, and it's not as though you have to really sacrifice a ton of card quality to do it. I mean, Elvish Mystic, Burning Tree Emissary, Scavenging Ooze, Polukranos, Arbor Colossus, Domri Raid, Xenagos, Garrett. We've seen all of these in very successful decks, but when you put them all together, it's a deck that can put, I mean, just an absurd amount of power on the board. And once it's there between Colossus and Polukranos, it still has plenty of things to do with its mana.
Yeah, what was the craziest thing you saw real quickly, Tim, down in the feature match area from Mahara?
I mean, in the feature match area, he was kind of just business as usual, having to play against Paul Rietzel, who had a bit more removal for some of his accelerants. He wasn't necessarily power things out quite so fast.
I see.
But we did get a chance to watch some of the Star City guys testing against this deck last night in the hotel, and some of the draws that this deck can get, it can have 20 mana on turn 4 quite happily.
Unbelievable. So hopefully we'll get to see something like that on camera. All right, so the players are seated. The stage is set. It's the semifinals here from Pro Tour Theros in Dublin. Right now, down in the commentating booth, everybody's favorite, Luis Scott Vargas. Everybody's favorite, Brian David Marshall. And my favorite, Richard Hagan. We'll send it over now for the semis here from Dublin.
Right.